A young doctor gently changed the bandage of a millionaire man in a coma. Surprisingly, he woke up and whispered something that froze the entire room. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Dr. Sophia Walker was not someone who shied away from challenges. At 28, she had already been hailed as one of the most compassionate and dedicated physicians at Riverside General Hospital. Still, she never dreamed she'd be tasked with the private care of Jonathan Hayes, the billionaire real estate magnate who had fallen into a coma months earlier. His case was both tragic and infamous. He'd collapsed unexpectedly during a high-stakes board meeting, and despite the best medical interventions, he never came out of that deep slumber. Headlines and rumors swirled about business feuds, secret heirs, and an ex-fiancée who vanished right after his collapse. Everyone in town debated the mystery, but only one fact was certain. The once mighty Jonathan Hayes was now an immovable figure, clinging to life in a luxurious private hospital suite. Sophia first encountered Jonathan under the hush of fluorescent lights one stormy evening. She'd been asked to switch his bandages, the result of a minor surgical wound that needed constant monitoring. Hospital staff whispered that few dared to approach him. Something about the hush of that massive fortune cast a shadow of intimidation. But to Sophia, Jonathan was just another patient in need. She put on her gloves, entered the private room, and observed him quietly. Despite being motionless, there was a commanding presence in the room, as if the aura of his wealth and reputation still vibrated in the very air. In the background, monitors beeped softly, marking the steady pace of his heartbeat. On a nearby stand sat a silver-framed photograph of Jonathan at some long-past charity gala, flanked by acquaintances in evening attire. Everything about that image spoke of opulence. Yet on his hospital bed he looked just like any other fragile human, fighting a silent battle. Sophia's first night with Jonathan was uneventful. She replaced the bandage with the meticulous care she gave all her patients. Still, something tugged at her heart. Perhaps it was the emptiness in his expression. Or maybe it was the unspoken question, how could a man with so much power and wealth end up so alone, with only the hum of machinery for company? After finishing her shift, she took a moment to study the lines of his face. Jonathan Hayes had been described as a force of nature, strict, unyielding in business, yet strangely philanthropic when it suited him. But none of that overlapped with the figure before her now, unresponsive under crisp white sheets. Word traveled quickly around the hospital that Dr. Walker had an especially gentle manner with the Comatose Billionaire. Nurses would whisper that she spent extra time in the room, humming softly as she arranged the bandages or checked his vitals. None of them knew that Sophia herself had grown up in hardship, a past that made her especially sensitive to pain and isolation. They just admired her calm approach. On her third shift, something unusual happened. Sophia, alone with Jonathan in the quiet of the early morning, suddenly found herself speaking to him. It was a near whisper, words tumbling out before she could hold them back. She told him about her own struggles, about the orphanage she came from. That place, run by a kind old nun named Sister Agnes, was on the brink of shutting down due to financial stress. Even as she spoke, she wasn't quite sure why she was unburdening herself. Maybe it was the hush of the room or the reflection she saw in Jonathan's silent face. She told him how she had once promised Sister Agnes she would find a way to save the orphanage that had been her only home. There was no response, of course. Jonathan lay still, as always. Yet as she finished checking the bandage, she felt an odd flutter of hope or maybe longing that he could hear her. In the corridor afterward, she reminded herself she was just a doctor offering care. This was her profession, not a confessional booth. But the next evening, she did it again. Carefully changed the bandage, spoke of the orphanage's debt, then apologized to him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. I'm just rambling. You must be tired of hearing me talk." Then, one fateful night, everything changed. The air in his private suite felt charged, as though a summer storm was coming. Sophia's gloved hands were steady as she lifted the old gauze. Her words, however, trembled with genuine worry. Sister Agnes had called her that very day, tearful, saying that if they couldn't raise funds soon, every child in the orphanage would be relocated, their home lost. The desperation in that phone call weighed on Sophia's heart all evening. When she finally muttered, "I wish you'd wake up, Jonathan Hayes. Maybe you could help me figure out what to do." She laughed at herself for the absurdity. What was she expecting? This was a man in a coma. But just as she finished placing the fresh bandage on his arm, she felt the faintest twitch under her fingertips. At first, she assumed she was imagining it. But no, his hand definitely moved. Heart pounding, Sophia leaned closer. "Mr. Hayes?" She scanned the monitors, verifying his vitals. The lines on the screens fluttered with irregular bursts. Carefully, she called his name again, louder this time. And then, against all logic, Jonathan Hayes stirred. His fingers twitched, and a low gasp came from his throat. Shocked, Sophia nearly dropped the bandage scissors. She pressed the emergency button, her mind racing. Could he really be emerging from a coma? His eyelids fluttered as if weighed down by countless weeks of unconsciousness. Sophia gently squeezed his hand, her voice calm but urgent. "Can you hear me, Mr. Hayes? It's Dr. Walker. You've been asleep for a very long time. We're here to help you." A rushed flurry of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Nurses and a physician on duty raced in. They began medical checks, adjusting IV lines, preparing for the possibility of a delirious or agitated patient. But Jonathan's eyes opened, searching. One moment he gazed at the overhead lights, and the next his bleary stare fell on Sophia. His lips parted, a rasping dryness to his words. "I heard you—" The medical team exchanged wide-eyed looks. Patients in long-term comas didn't usually just snap out of them fully lucid. Yet here he was, gazing intently at the young doctor, as though compelled by the softness in her expression. Sophia felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes, tears of relief, or maybe just the weight of the moment. She had never expected that the near impossible would happen, much less be triggered by her pleas. "Let's not strain you, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice trembling. "We'll need to move slowly. You've been in this bed a long time." He coughed, his voice like sandpaper, but insistent. "You, orphanage. I'll help." A hush fell upon the medical staff. It was such an odd statement to be the first words from a man like Jonathan Hayes. And yet it dawned on Sophia that he truly must have heard her. She steadied her own heart's frantic beats and said, "Mr. Hayes, don't worry. We'll talk about all of this when you've recovered more strength. Right now, we need to make sure you're stable." But Jonathan, with surprising strength, grabbed Sophia's wrist. His eyes flashed in that moment, a flicker of the empire-building tycoon he once was. "I promised," he said, voice cracking. "I promised. I'll save your orphanage." Sophia found herself nodding, though unsure how else to respond. She glanced at the head nurse, who was already calling for the ICU team to examine this miraculous reawakening. Jonathan's hand slipped from her wrist, his energy spent from that short declaration. He fell back into shallow sleep, but not the coma-like state, more the exhaustion of someone who's run a marathon. Within minutes, the hospital stirred like a disturbed beehive. The sensational news traveled across wards and corridors. Jonathan Hayes, the comatose billionaire, had awakened. Nurses speculated about the role of Dr. Walker. Some said it was purely medical timing. Others whispered about the power of a gentle caretaker's words. The hospital's phone lines buzzed with inquiries from tabloids and local TV, all wanting a statement on the miracle. Sophia remained close, assisting the ICU team. Machines beeped in a new rhythm. The staff busied themselves taking fresh vitals, scheduling brain scans, and drawing blood to check for any changes. Still, the question lingered. Would Jonathan remain lucid enough to continue that remarkable statement about the orphanage, or had it been a fleeting spark? Days passed, and Jonathan stabilized. Although physically weak, he'd regained certain faculties with astonishing speed. He recognized the hospital environment, asked direct questions, wanted news of his holdings. True, he tired out after even short conversations, but each day was progress. And each day, when Sophia visited, he offered a nod or an appreciative tilt of his head. It was as if he trusted her above anyone else. She tried to keep her distance in a professional sense, but there was an undeniable bond. In quiet moments, he'd murmur, "Tell me about the children, the place you grew up," and Sophia would softly relay the orphanage's struggles. The once silent hospital suite now echoed with gentle conversation. But a storm was brewing just outside. Unbeknownst to Sophia, rumors had spread among Jonathan's closest associates that he was awake. Investors, business partners, and even distant relatives circled like hawks. More disconcerting, a certain woman named Camille, a striking figure from his past, had arrived in town upon hearing the news. Few in the hospital staff realized it yet, but the ex-fiancé's sudden return would ignite a new chapter of turmoil. Camille Travers had once been draped on Jonathan's arm at high society galas, a statuesque brunette with an icy smile. Their engagement ended in scandal, though no one knew the precise reasons. Now, as the news of Jonathan's miraculous return spread, Camille's presence promised drama. She carried impeccable style, a cunning wit, and a determination to reclaim the spotlight next to the man she claimed was always hers. For Sophia, life had already shifted. Everyone in the hospital seemed to regard her as the doctor who revived the millionaire. Whispers followed her in corridors, the staff subtly distancing themselves with curiosity or jealousy. Even Sister Agnes phoned daily, hopeful that Jonathan's vow to help the orphanage would come true. But Sophia remained cautious. She didn't want to pin the future of her beloved orphanage on a man who was still so frail. Promises made in half-lucid states could crumble under the weight of reality. Yet on the evening of Jonathan's official discharge from the ICU, the unexpected happened. As Sophia checked his chart, ensuring that all was well for the move to a private recovery suite, Jonathan placed a hand over the chart. "I remember," he said, voice low but steady. "I wasn't delirious. I made you a promise, and I intend to keep it." In that moment, the old spark in his gray eyes reminded her of the towering businessman rumored to strike fear into corporate boards. But there was also sincerity. A hush fell between them. It felt like the calm before a storm, as though the next phase of Jonathan's life, and hers, would be shaped by that vow. Then, right in the corridor, came the crisp echo of high heels. Camille Travers appeared, her posture regal, lips painted with a subtle, confident red. She stared at Jonathan in the wheelchair, ignoring everyone else. "Jonathan," she breathed, her voice a silky blend of surprise and calculated joy. "My darling, you're awake." Their eyes locked. The tension was so thick you could almost slice it. Jonathan's expression hardened, a wave of old memories surfacing. Camille's presence unsettled everyone, especially Sophia, who felt suddenly invisible. The ex-fiancé stepped closer, her gaze flickering with unreadable intentions. "I've come back for you," Camille declared, a slight tremor in her voice. "I never gave up hope." But it wasn't hope that glinted in her eyes. It was something else. Something that promised to unravel every plan Jonathan might be forming, including the promise he'd made to Dr. Sophia Walker. Rain battered the hospital windows later that same day, as though reflecting the sudden tempest that was Camille's return. The staff in the hallway exchanged uneasy glances at the sight of her standing there with such confidence, her tailored coat still damp from the weather. Moments ago, Jonathan Hayes had been wheeled out of the ICU, and now Camille seemed determined to insert herself at the very center of this new chapter in his life. Dr. Sophia Walker stood to the side, gripping Jonathan's patient chart. After all the progress he'd made, the last thing she wanted was a swirl of conflict. Yet she couldn't help but notice how Jonathan's shoulders stiffened at Camille's voice. There had always been rumors that their breakup was mired in betrayal and heartbreak. Something in the way they faced each other now, from Jonathan's unreadable gaze to Camille's forced smile, suggested those old wounds were very much alive. "Jonathan," Camille repeated softly, "it's such a relief to see you awake. You have no idea how long I've waited for this moment." A faint tremor passed through Jonathan's hands, the ones so recently freed from months of being unresponsive. He took a breath that sounded like the first step of a laborious climb. "Camille," he said in a low, guarded tone, "I didn't think you'd come back." She laughed, but it was mirthless. "Why wouldn't I? We were almost married, Jonathan. And yes, things got complicated, but I never stopped caring about you, or us." Sophia's eyes flicked toward Jonathan's face. She noticed that when Camille mentioned their past, his expression grew more guarded. Was it possible Camille was here, not for love, but for some advantage? Yet she had no real right to judge. This was a personal matter between them, a tangle that had existed long before she, an orphanage doctor with barely 2 nickels to rub together, ever crossed Jonathan Hayes's path. The hospital staff quickly cleared the hallway. One nurse offered Sophia an apologetic shrug, as if to say, "We don't want to meddle," and disappeared around the corner. That left only the 3 of them in uneasy silence, plus the occasional beep from the medical machinery parked near Jonathan's wheelchair. Camille crouched down so that she was face to face with him. Even in that position, she radiated an aristocratic air. "You look better than I thought," she said tenderly, setting a manicured hand on his arm. "But you need rest. Let me handle the big decisions for a while, To Sophia's surprise, Jonathan's gaze darted to her for the briefest moment. A flicker of anxiety passed through his eyes before he addressed Camille again. "I have help," he said. "My doctors, especially Dr. Walker, are guiding my recovery. I don't need you to handle everything." Camille's gaze followed his, and for the first time, she acknowledged Sophia. A quick assessment flickered behind those dark eyes, like an aristocrat sizing up a household maid. "Ah, yes," she said, her tone borderline dismissive. "Dr. Walker, the hospital staff told me about you. Jonathan's miracle worker." She studied Sophia with an expression perched between curiosity and condescension. "Interesting how you managed to bring him back when so many specialists failed." Sophia braced herself. "With all due respect, Ms. Travers," she said softly, "no one person brought Mr. Hayes back. His physical therapy, the hospital's care, even his own will, those were the critical factors. I just happened to be there when he showed the first signs of improvement." Camille's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, dismissing the subject, "I suppose I should be thankful." Yet her gaze lingered, as though she were already looking for vulnerabilities. A security guard with a clipboard broke the tension by appearing in the corridor. He explained that Jonathan's belongings were being transferred to a private rehabilitation suite. Several business associates had begun calling too, wanting updates. As the guard spoke, Jonathan rubbed his temples, evidently feeling the weight of responsibilities he had once effortlessly managed. Camille was the first to respond. "Tell them Mr. Hayes needs rest," she said in a tone so commanding it made the guard blink. "If they want a statement, they can go through me." Sophia found herself stepping in. "Actually, I advise we keep communications minimal until Mr. Hayes is stable. Right now, his greatest need is physical and mental recuperation. Non-essential meetings should wait." The guard nodded, then gave both women a puzzled look, unsure who to obey. Jonathan ended the standoff by speaking up. "Let them know I'm awake, but no meetings. I'll decide next steps soon." He exhaled, turning to Camille with a gravity that suggested far more than exhaustion. Camille, I appreciate your concern, but everything's changed. My future and my priorities aren't the same as they once were. She arched an eyebrow. Oh? And what does that mean? Before he could answer, a nurse whisked Jonathan away to do final checkups. It left Sophia and Camille momentarily alone in a hush that bristled with unspoken challenges. The overhead fluorescence glinted off Camille's earrings, tiny diamonds that probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled carrying fresh linens. Camille leaned in. I may have been gone, doctor, but I'm not blind. Jonathan was mine once. I'm here to make sure he's well looked after in the right ways. Her voice carried an implication that her presence was the correct brand of care, overshadowing any mere medical staff. Sophia, hands clasped at her waist, held her composure. I only want him to recover. I have no stake in his personal affairs. Camille said, unconvinced. We'll see. Later that evening, Sophia sat in the empty staff lounge, sipping lukewarm coffee. The swirl of events had left her head spinning. Jonathan's awakening, his promise to help her orphanage, and now Camille's abrupt re-entry into his life. If Jonathan truly followed through on his vow, it could mean everything for Sister Agnes and the children. Was she foolish to hope such a promise would stand amid new complications? A tired nurse entered the lounge, offering a supportive smile. Long day, huh? Heard about Ms. Travers returning. She's a piece of work, that one. Sophia sighed. I barely know her, but it's clear she's protective of him. Maybe it's not my place to say. The nurse shrugged. Maybe, but watch your back. Folks like her don't like outsiders in the picture. Sophia couldn't deny the prickle of unease she felt. The nurse left, and she sat alone for a few moments more. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was Sister Agnes. Hello, sister, Sophia answered, forcing a note of cheer she didn't fully feel. Oh, my child, I heard the marvelous news that Mr. Hayes is awake. Sister Agnes's voice crackled with excitement over the line. Have you spoken to him about the orphanage? Have you asked him if— Sister, slow down, Sophia said gently. Yes, he's awake. Yes, he mentioned wanting to help. But right now he's very weak. I can't press him. It wouldn't be ethical. Sister Agnes's voice turned anxious. I understand, dear, but the city council is sending an official notice next week to finalize the orphanage's closure. We need funds desperately. I'm frightened for the children. Sophia's chest tightened. I know, sister. Let me see what I can do. Please just hold on a little longer. When she ended the call, her heart felt heavier than ever. If Jonathan's new circumstances pushed him away from that vow, where else would she find the means to save those children? By the following morning, word had spread that Jonathan Hayes was officially leaving the hospital. Dr. Walker oversaw the last of his discharge papers, while a group of private nurses employed by Hayes's estate stood ready to help him transition to in-home care. Camille was there as well, controlling the entire scene with a polished efficiency. You'll stay at the lakeside mansion, darling, Camille said lightly, flipping through forms. It's quiet, secluded. Perfect for your recovery. I've already arranged top physical therapists. An uncomfortable hush followed. Jonathan looked down at his clasped hands. I want Dr. Walker on my team, he said suddenly. His statement echoed in the hallway, causing staff members to turn in surprise. Camille gave a gracious yet tight-lipped nod as though the idea displeased her, but she had to humor it. Of course, if that's what you want. Sophia, standing with her arms folded, hesitated. Mr. Hayes, you have an entire staff at your disposal. Is it absolutely necessary that I— It's my health, Jonathan interrupted, not unkindly. And I trust your methods, Dr. Walker. Then his gaze softened. Please. Sophia was torn. On one hand, it felt oddly personal. On the other, a part of her was relieved to stay near, to see if he would truly keep that promise about the orphanage. Plus, she couldn't deny she cared about his recovery. This new chance at life seemed precarious. The last thing she wanted was for him to slip back into a crisis. "All right," she said softly. Camille exhaled, satisfied for now. "Wonderful. Then we should leave quickly. The estate's vehicles are outside." They relocated Jonathan by ambulance purely as a precaution. Sophia rode alongside him, monitoring his vitals, while Camille followed in a sleek black car. As they traveled through the city, Jonathan looked out the window, taking in the skyline for the first time in months. His eyes lingered on certain landmarks, spots he once owned or influenced. "There's so much I need to fix," he whispered. "Things that happened while I was gone." Sophia quietly tucked a blanket around him. "Step by step," she said. "Focus on getting better first." He nodded, exhausted by even this short conversation. The entire ride, a million questions danced on his face, but he was too weak to voice them all. Sophia resolved to keep him calm, to make sure he didn't overtax himself. When they arrived at the lakeside mansion, a name that hardly captured the grandeur of the estate, it felt like stepping into another world. Iron gates parted, revealing manicured lawns, fountains, and a massive home perched elegantly by a picturesque lake. A retinue of staff awaited, many wearing stoic faces. News had clearly reached them that their employer had awakened. Some wore relief, others merely wore the formal politeness that wealth demanded. Sophia helped settle Jonathan into a ground-floor suite that had been converted into a comfortable recovery room, plush carpets, a hospital bed set up near large windows, and an array of sophisticated medical equipment. After hooking him up to monitors, she ran a quick check. Satisfied, she stepped back so the private nurses could take over. Camille hovered in the doorway. "I've arranged for the chef to prepare a restorative menu," she said crisply. "Only the best. Bone broths, fresh-pressed juices, a bit of caviar if he can tolerate it." Sophia found her medical instincts bristling at the mention of such indulgent foods. "We'll need to follow a controlled diet during his first days out of the hospital," she explained. "I'll speak with the chef to make sure the menu aligns with his nutritional plan." Camille offered a tight smile. "But of course, whatever you think is best." Outside the bedroom, a small living area had been turned into a command center of sorts, with file boxes, computer screens, and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Various business associates and accountants had begun calling for statements or instructions. A slender man in a fine suit approached Sophia, introduced himself as Clark, Jonathan's personal attorney. He set a thick stack of documents on a table. "Once Mr. Hayes is feeling better, I must brief him," Clark said, voice grave. "There are pressing concerns about his real estate holdings, philanthropic funds, and certain pending lawsuits." Sophia frowned at the thickness of the files. Lawsuits. She realized Jonathan's empire was not only massive but complicated. The man who lay quietly in the next room had far more to deal with than just physical therapy. Late that evening, after the mansion's staff had done their duties and the house fell silent, Sophia stepped outside for fresh air. The estate's garden glowed under soft lanterns, the lake reflecting moonlight. She inhaled the crisp breeze, trying to find a moment of calm. Her phone chimed. It was Sister Agnes again, no doubt anxious. Sophia took a breath, preparing for another discussion about funds, deadlines, the orphanage's imminent closure. She understood Sister Agnes's panic, but she also knew Jonathan was in no condition to be bombarded right now. Just as she was about to pick up, a shadow fell across the patio. She turned to see Camille approaching, her silhouette sleek under the moon's glow. Even though the night was chilly, Camille wore a sleeveless dress that showed no sign of discomfort. "You're out here alone," Camille remarked casually. Sophia nodded, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Sister Agnes would have to wait a minute. "I needed a breather." Camille took a step closer, her gaze probing. "I wanted to apologize," she said surprisingly. "I may have seemed abrupt at the hospital, but Jonathan's well-being is personal to me." "I understand," Sophia said simply. Camille's gaze drifted to the phone that was now silent. You've given him your time and dedication. I do appreciate that. But I also want you to understand something. He and I share a history, one that's complicated but significant. If you ever find that what should I call it? Your involvement with him extends beyond professional duties, you should know you're walking into a world of high stakes. Sophia's cheeks warmed. Was Camille implying something romantic? I'm here as his doctor, she answered carefully, though the mention of the orphanage promise flickered in her mind. The older woman gave a small, knowing smile as though she'd read Sophia's very thoughts. Good. Then we'll have no issues, I'm sure. She pivoted gracefully and disappeared back into the house. Sophia exhaled, tension spreading through her shoulders. One thing was crystal clear. Camille Travers was not about to let anything or anyone disrupt her renewed claim on Jonathan Hayes. And given Jonathan's fragile state and that vow about the orphanage, Sophia knew she was wading into precarious waters. The question was, how could she help Jonathan without setting off the avalanche of jealousy or suspicion that Camille carried like a hidden weapon? At that moment, her phone lit up again. Sister Agnes's name flashed. The orphanage wouldn't wait forever. The guilt gnawed at her. She had to find a way, some quiet window of time to approach Jonathan, to gently remind him of his promise before the closure advanced any further. But how, when every corner of his life was overshadowed by Camille's watchful presence, a swarm of business obligations, and his own fragile health? The night sky offered no answers, just a scattering of stars and the hush of water against the lake's shore. Tomorrow the real test would begin, integrating therapy sessions, setting up a schedule that balanced his physical limits with the urgent demands of a billionaire's empire. And overshadowing it all was the tension simmering between the woman who used to be on Jonathan's arm and the doctor who had unexpectedly forged a bond with him in a silent hospital room. Long before dawn streaked the sky, Dr. Sophia Walker found herself awake in one of the lakeside mansion's guest bedrooms. She couldn't recall the last time she'd slept properly, maybe back when Jonathan Hayes was still lost to the world in that silent coma. Everything since his awakening had been a swirl of high-stakes obligations, tense encounters with Camille Travers, and constant worry about how to broach the topic of the orphanage's looming closure without jeopardizing her patient's stability. Through the tall windows of the guest room, she could see the calm surface of the lake reflecting early morning moonlight. The hush felt like the house itself was holding its breath, except she knew that soon staff would start bustling, private nurses checking vitals, cooks preparing breakfast trays, phone calls beginning to rattle the heavy landlines of the mansion's business center. It was as if Jonathan's entire empire never truly slept, but instead waited for orders that had been absent for far too long. In her mind, two distinct responsibilities collided. Her role as Jonathan's doctor and caretaker, a duty that demanded she guard his health and not stress him unduly, and her personal mission to see if he truly meant that promise of saving the orphanage. Sister Agnes had called again just before midnight, voice quivering with a new fear. The city council's final notice would arrive in mere days, and the children in that orphanage, Sophia's only family, had no idea where they'd be sent if the place shut down. She rubbed her eyes, telling herself to remain calm. There had to be a way to keep Jonathan's mental burden light, while at least informing him of the urgent timeline. Perhaps she'd bring it up gently during a routine check. Let him know the situation, but not press for an immediate solution. That felt like the only fair approach. Yet each time she thought about it, the memory of Camille's pointed warning returned, echoing in her head. If you ever find that your involvement goes beyond professional duties, you're walking into high-stakes territory. Still, the children's future was on the line. Sophia decided she would wait until the perfect window. Some quiet moment alone with Jonathan when he was alert, not overwhelmed by a swirl of business demands. That, she told herself, was the best path forward. By 6 a.m, the mansion's staff was active, moving through corridors with practiced discretion. Sophia prepared a small table in Jonathan's recovery suite for his breakfast, a medically approved blend of oatmeal, fruit, and mild tea. When she knocked and entered, she discovered that a private nurse had already helped him sit up, adjusting the bed so that he rested against several pillows. Even after a few days out of the hospital, Jonathan looked pale, but his eyes carried more focus than before. "Morning, Dr. Walker," he greeted, voice husky from sleep. A faint half-smile tugged at his lips, a sign that his confidence was slowly returning. She checked the monitors, verifying his pulse and oxygen levels, then laid the breakfast tray on a movable table. "How are you feeling today? Any pain or dizziness?" He inhaled deeply, as though testing his own lung capacity. "Not as bad as yesterday," he admitted. "My muscles still feel weak, but I can breathe easier. That's progress, right?" Sophia smiled. "Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on it. The physical therapist should arrive soon. I'd like them to do a gentle session with you, mostly stretching. After that, we can see how your vitals respond." Jonathan nodded, but his gaze drifted to the wide window overlooking the lake. "I've been dreaming about everything," he said quietly. "All the projects I left undone, the philanthropic fund I'd started, the children's hospital wing that was supposed to open last year, and—" He hesitated, turning to her. "I keep hearing your voice, telling me about an orphanage." Sophia's heart gave a jump. She tried not to show her surprise. "You do remember. Well, while you were still in the hospital, you mentioned wanting to help me keep it running." He reached for the water glass with an unsteady hand, but Sophia gently guided it to his lips. After a sip, he nodded. "Yes, it's not just some fleeting vow. I meant it when I said I would. What's the current situation?" Her breath caught. She told herself not to overwhelm him. "We can discuss the details when you're stronger," she said softly. "But I'd be lying if I said it's not urgent. The orphanage faces immediate closure. Funding fell through and the city council doesn't have the resources to keep it open." Jonathan's brow furrowed, the old boardroom strategist flickering behind his eyes. "Then let's handle it. You've done so much for me, Dr. Walker. It's time I return the favor." Relief rushed through her, but also caution. She didn't want to feed him an entire legal fiasco in his condition. "Let's set aside time to talk specifics. Soon. Maybe in a day or two. That will give you a bit of rest and we can gather the data you need." He squeezed her hand in thanks. She felt a wave of warmth at the genuine concern shining in his expression. Then, mindful of her role, she withdrew her hand and placed it politely in her coat pocket. "For now, try to eat a little and prepare for therapy. I'm proud of the progress you've made." Yet any sense of calm was short-lived. Not an hour later, the Lakeview suite bustled with visitors bearing briefcases. Clark, Jonathan's personal attorney, arrived with two other men in sharp suits who introduced themselves as financial consultants. Overlapping their arrival, a stoic, silver-haired man stepped in, bowing respectfully. Raymond Marsh, an executive from Hayes's real estate division. They all talked at once, pressing for decisions about property expansions, contract renewals, or unsettled lawsuits. Jonathan forced composure, but Sophia could see how the onslaught drained him. Even though he tried to keep up, she noticed him occasionally wincing, pressing a hand to his temple as though the noise was too much. Unable to ignore it, she stepped in. "We need to limit these sessions. Mr. Hayes is still recovering and can't be overwhelmed." The men exchanged looks, and Clark stepped forward. "Dr. Walker, we understand your concerns, but there are pending deadlines, some quite serious. We're only here because we absolutely must be. This empire can't survive on autopilot." Sophia stood firm. "Then we'll create a schedule, specific times when he's ready to meet, and the rest of the day he rests. If that's a problem, you'll need to speak to me and Mr. Hayes's physiotherapy team." Jonathan exhaled, a hint of gratitude in his nod. "I agree with the doctor," he said quietly, turning to Clark and the others. Let's break this up. Create a list of the top 3 issues I need to address right now. I'll manage those, then get some rest. The rest can wait." The men had no choice but to comply. Sophia helped them shape a quick, single-topic appointment that would last no more than 30 minutes. Everyone seemed relieved to have clarity, and Jonathan's posture eased slightly as though the knowledge that he wouldn't be hammered for hours brought him comfort. Notably absent through this chaos was Camille. Sophia wondered where the ex-fiancé had gone, but she discovered the answer when she stepped into the mansion's foyer. Camille was there, near the front entrance, conferring with a uniformed household staff member about a lavish social event. Overhearing bits of the conversation, Sophia realized Camille was planning some sort of welcome-back soiree for Jonathan. The staffer sounded hesitant, reminding Camille that Mr. Hayes was fragile, yet Camille insisted a small gathering, just a select circle of close friends and potential investors, might boost his morale. Sophia felt a flicker of alarm. Throwing him into a social gathering so soon could be catastrophic. She cleared her throat gently, stepping forward. "Ms. Travers? May I have a word, please?" Camille pivoted, a bright veneer of politeness on her face. "Yes, doctor?" Sophia spoke quietly. "I overheard something about an event. May I remind you that Jonathan's condition is delicate? A party, even a small one, could put undue stress on him." Camille waved a hand in a well-practiced gesture of dismissal. "I understand your caution, but trust me, Jonathan needs to reclaim a bit of normalcy. Keeping him isolated is only going to prolong his sense of powerlessness. We're not inviting the entire city, just a handful of influential figures who can help smooth the waters. After all, I hear there's been talk among the board that Jonathan may be too weak to lead." The logic wasn't entirely flawed. Regaining control of his image might reassure certain factions that Jonathan was still in command. Still, the medical side of Sophia bristled at the risk. "I'd like him to get stronger physically before stepping into a public arena, even if it's just in his own home." Camille pursed her lips. "You do your job, and I'll do mine," she said with forced politeness. "I'll run every detail by him, of course. If he's not up to it, we'll postpone. But if he wants to forge ahead, I won't stand in his way, neither should you." Sophia met her gaze. She felt the tension crackling between them. Two forces protecting Jonathan in different ways. One out of medical necessity, the other out of personal or even strategic reasons. "All right," she said finally. "But please, let me know before any final decision. I can help ensure the environment is safe for him." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and headed back to Jonathan's suite, inwardly unsettled. Camille's approach might end up forcing Jonathan into a social scenario he wasn't yet ready for, and if it caused a setback in his healing, who would pick up the pieces? Early afternoon arrived with a hush. Business associates had cleared out temporarily. Camille was off in some distant wing of the mansion finalizing arrangements for that possible party. Private nurses were on a break, though on standby. Sophia seized the moment to check on Jonathan more thoroughly. She found him dozing in the recliner near his bed, a medical wrap around his torso to stabilize some lingering muscle issues. He stirred when she entered, opening one eye. "No more meetings, I hope?" She smiled, a gentle one. "Not for at least a couple of hours. I wanted to see if we could do a short breathing exercise session. Might help with your stamina." He nodded, eyelids heavy. "You're the boss, doctor." Over the next half hour, Sophia guided him through slow breathing cycles, gentle arm and shoulder movements, encouraging him to push his boundaries just enough to build strength without strain. Jonathan complied, although she could see the smallest tasks made him tremble. It was remarkable how months of immobility had sapped his once formidable energy. When they finished, Jonathan exhaled carefully. "It's strange," he murmured. "I used to have the energy to take on entire corporate boards from morning until midnight. Now, a few simple stretches leave me winded." Sophia reached for a towel, blotting the sweat on his brow. "But look how far you've come in just days. Patience, one step at a time." He stared at her, perhaps remembering how she had repeated that mantra the first night he'd regained consciousness. "Dr. Walker, Sophia, can I ask you something personal?" She paused, uncertain. "Of course." He hesitated. "Camille told me something earlier. Said you might be using my recovery to get something you want. That the orphanage you mentioned was a sob story to emotionally manipulate me." His gaze was gentle, not accusatory. "I just want you to know that if I do help your orphanage, it's not because you tricked me. It's because I choose to." A flush of anger and embarrassment lit Sophia's cheeks. She forced herself to remain calm. "I'd never manipulate you like that. My orphanage is real and I'm genuinely worried about its future, but I'd never push you into something that harms your health or your interests. If you decide not to help, that's your right." He studied her face carefully, then nodded. "I believe you. I just wanted to say it aloud so there's no misunderstanding." Sophia's voice softened. "Thank you. She hesitated. Should she share more? "I grew up with no one else, Jonathan. Sister Agnes was the closest thing I had to a mother. We never had enough money, but we had each other. If the council closes that place, every child loses that safety and love I knew. I can't let that happen. But I'm not wealthy or influential. I'm just a doctor." He reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're more than just anything, Sophia." Then he let go, leaning back with a weary sigh. "Don't worry. We'll solve it." She stepped away, heart heavy and light at the same time. Perhaps it was relief that he still intended to keep his promise, or maybe sadness that Camille would twist the situation into a question of motives. For once, though, she felt that Jonathan saw her as someone who cared, not a leech looking for a handout. By early evening, the staff served a subdued dinner. Jonathan's appetite remained small, so Sophia asked the kitchen to provide simple vegetable soup and toast. She lingered nearby as he ate, scanning a set of updated therapy notes. That's when Camille reappeared, wearing an elegant dress that suggested she'd come back from some high society engagement. She paused in the threshold of Jonathan's suite, casting a critical eye over the tray of modest soup. "My goodness, Jonathan," she teased lightly. "One would think you've become a monk with these humble meals. Didn't we always love caviar and fine wine?" He gave her a small shrug, sipping the soup. "Times change, Camille. My stomach needs simpler fare now." She came in, setting down a slender folder on a nearby table. "I've sketched out the event plan. A little gathering, 20 or 30 of our closest business allies, to show them you're back on your feet. I'm aiming for next weekend. Nothing flashy, just a chance to reassure everyone that the Hayes Empire isn't faltering." Sophia stiffened, certain that Jonathan needed far more recovery time. But it was his decision, so she held her tongue. Jonathan looked uncertain. "I don't know if I'll be strong enough, Camille. This therapy is draining. Maybe we should wait." Camille's smile faltered momentarily, but she rallied. "We'll keep it short. You won't have to stand for hours. We'll set up everything so you can be comfortable. But if you truly want to wait—" She let the sentence dangle, expertly provoking a sense of responsibility. He set the soup aside, thinking, "Let me see how I feel at the end of the week. If my doctor says I'm ready, we'll host your small event, but I won't risk a relapse." Camille's gaze flicked to Sophia, as if seeing whether the young doctor would chime in. But Sophia chose to remain neutral, only remarking, "We'll assess your progress in a few days. If it's too soon, we'll advise accordingly." "Oh, of course," Camille said sweetly, though the tension in her eyes told another story. Night fell. Across the estate, the staff dimmed hallway lights, locked ornate doors, and retreated to their quarters. Outside, the moon shimmered over the lake again, a silent witness to the mounting conflicts in the mansion's walls. Sophia finished her final round, checking Jonathan's vitals. Satisfied that he was stable, she quietly left to get some rest. But as she passed through the grand foyer, her phone vibrated. Sister Agnes once more. This time, Sophia answered without hesitation, moving out to the veranda to keep her voice low. "Sister, I'm sorry for all the missed calls," she began softly. "My child, I only want to hear if there's any progress," Sister Agnes pleaded. "We got a notice in the mail today. The official closure date is in 10 days, not next month. 10 days, Sophia." A wave of panic flooded her. 10 days left. That was barely over a week. "That soon?" she managed. "Please, do you think Mr. Hayes will help us? Or at least direct us to some channel of funding? These children are terrified." Sophia pressed a hand to her forehead, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "He said he wants to help," she said, as reassurance for herself as much as for Sister Agnes. "But I have to be careful. His health is still fragile, and his ex-fiancée, it's complicated." She took a breath. "But I promise I won't let you down. Let me handle this." After hanging up, she stood on that veranda, gazing out at the star-laced sky. 10 days. She'd have to find a way to expedite Jonathan's involvement, or at least secure partial funds to keep the orphanage afloat until further solutions were found. The question was, could she navigate around Camille's vigilance and the avalanche of business crises demanding Jonathan's attention? As she turned to go inside, a dark silhouette emerged from the shadows. A groundskeeper, or so she thought, but the figure quickly melted away, disappearing behind a hedge. In the moonlight, the shape looked suspiciously like one of Camille's personal drivers. Instinctively, Sophia's heart raced. Had someone been eavesdropping? Watching her? It was a chilling reminder that within this estate, secrets might be currency and caution was essential. Could it be that Camille had assigned someone to keep tabs on her? To gather evidence that Sophia was pushing an agenda behind Jonathan's back? One thing was certain. Time was short, and the stakes were impossibly high. If she didn't carefully but swiftly secure Jonathan's help, Sister Agnes would watch the doors of their beloved orphanage close forever. But if she rushed Jonathan or alarmed Camille, the entire fragile balance of his recovery could shatter, along with the last hope for those children. In the hush of that moonlit veranda, with the suspicious shadow gone, Sophia steeled herself. She might be just a young doctor with no fortune, but she had two powerful allies on her side. The compassion she'd awakened in Jonathan Hayes and the unbreakable bond she felt with every child who'd ever needed a safe place to call home. Neither Camille's intrigues nor the mansion's labyrinth of business deals would stop Sophia from trying. She would walk this tightrope day by day, minute by minute, until she found a path that led Jonathan Hayes and the orphanage to a brighter tomorrow. Daylight brought an unsettling calm to the lakeside mansion. If not for the tense undercurrents, one might have likened the estate to a postcard-perfect retreat, with its sweeping gardens, manicured hedges, and the gentle glimmer of the lake at sunrise. But for Dr. Sophia Walker, the serenity felt like a fragile shell, one that could shatter with the next unexpected visitor, the next rushed phone call, or the next twist in Jonathan Hayes's precarious recovery. That morning, Sophia rose early, mind buzzing with everything she had to accomplish: monitor Jonathan's vitals, schedule new exercises with the physical therapist, and somehow, without tipping the precarious balance, get him to act on the orphanage's dire situation. 10 days. The number pulsed in her thoughts like a silent countdown. She pulled on a fresh set of scrubs, pinned her hair out of her face, and walked down the grand corridor leading to Jonathan's suite. The corridor's plush carpet muted her footsteps, and the early rays of sun streamed through stained glass windows, painting the walls with soft colors. Despite the mansion's warmth and elegance, she couldn't shake the chill that had lodged in her bones after spotting that shadowy figure last night. Was Camille truly having her watched, or was her imagination running wild under so much stress? Outside Jonathan's doors, two of his private nurses stood whispering over a clipboard. They smiled politely when Sophia approached. "Good morning, Dr. Walker," one greeted. "Mr. Hayes is awake, but he asked to see you alone first." Sophia thanked them and stepped inside. The curtains were pulled back, allowing bright light to spill across the bed where Jonathan sat propped up by pillows. He was gazing out the window, a pensive look on his face. A tray bearing half-eaten toast and a glass of juice rested on the table beside him. He turned and offered a small, tired smile. "I was hoping you'd come by early," he said. "I had a restless night." Sophia approached, checking the monitors attached to him. "Headache? Pain? Or just insomnia?" she asked, her tone kind but professional. He rubbed the back of his neck. "A bit of everything, really. My muscles ache and my mind won't shut off. Memories, responsibilities, regrets, they're all piling up." She couldn't help but recall Sister Agnes's trembling voice and the knowledge that time was slipping away for the orphanage. But she decided to let him speak first, see where his thoughts led. She quietly wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm, pumping it gently until it hissed. "I need to handle so many things," Jonathan continued. "When I was unconscious, it feels like the world moved on without me. Camille keeps talking about some gathering. My lawyer wants me to sign off on new property deals. And then there's the matter you and I discussed." Sophia's heart hammered at that last reference. "Yes, the orphanage." She tried to keep her voice steady. "But we don't have to—" "I want to help. I gave you my word," he interrupted, holding her gaze with surprising intensity. "I can't ignore that. It's not just about paying a debt for my recovery, it's about doing something that matters." His shoulders fell a fraction. "But everything's a battle right now. Even reading through basic documents leaves me exhausted. My mind, it's not as quick as it used to be." Sophia removed the cuff, noting the blood pressure reading, slightly elevated, likely from stress, but not alarming. She jotted it down. "We can take it step by step. And remember, you're not alone. If we need someone with financial expertise to handle the specifics quickly, maybe Clark can help." Jonathan's mouth tightened. "I'm cautious about letting too many people know I'm moving funds. Camille especially might start spinning tales about being manipulated or, well, you know." She understood. Camille had already sown seeds of doubt about Sophia's motives. Still, she pressed gently. "To secure the orphanage, we need a large sum or a commitment that proves its solvency. Once the city council sees stable backing, they won't proceed with closure." He blew out a breath. "Tell me exactly how much is needed." Sophia's mind reeled. Should she mention the council's 10-day deadline now, or would that push him too hard? Gently, she answered, "Sister Agnes says the immediate debt is around $200,000. That would cover repairs, overdue taxes, and keep them afloat for at least another year. Beyond that, we'd need an ongoing support plan." She saw him mentally calculate and recognized the flicker of the old Jonathan, efficient, decisive. "200,000 is nothing to my estate," he said, though his voice was strained with fatigue. "But the formalities might take time, moving money, drawing up an official sponsorship. Clark can handle the legal framework if I ask, but I don't want word getting back to Camille just yet." Sophia nodded. "Understood. If you'd like, I can talk to Sister Agnes about a temporary bridging solution. Some document that shows the orphanage is guaranteed enough funds to cancel the closure notice. Then we'll finalize the rest after your recovery. But we have to act soon. The council's final decision is in 10 days. He looked up, startled. 10 days? Why didn't you tell me it was that soon? I worried about adding stress, she admitted softly, her cheeks warming with guilt. I'm sorry. His expression darkened, not in anger at Sophia, but at the realization of how little time they had. All right, he said, determination coloring his tone. We'll do it immediately. Today, if possible. You'll call Sister Agnes, get me the official documents, and I'll sign off. We can keep it private for now. I'll instruct Clark, but I'll insist on confidentiality. That should keep Camille and others out of it." Before Sophia could answer, voices sounded outside the door. One nurse peeked in. "Sir, Ms. Travers is looking for you. She says it's urgent." Jonathan let out a quiet groan, gesturing for Sophia to hide the conversation. She slipped her notepad into her coat pocket just as Camille breezed in, her expression flitting between concern and impatience. "Jonathan," she said briskly, "I've just been on a call with the PR team. They're insisting that we finalize a date for your comeback event, or else the rumors about your health might spiral. Is everything all right?" Her eyes lingered on Sophia, as though suspecting secrets were being shared. "Dr. Walker was giving me a routine check," Jonathan said calmly. "And as for the event, I'm not sure yet. I'm still discussing it with my medical team." Camille forced a smile. "I understand. Just know that the business world is restless. A small, well-handled gathering will reassure the board and the media that you're still in charge. So, if you don't mind, I'll tentatively set it for the end of the week." She glanced at Sophia as though waiting for an objection. Sophia kept her tone neutral. "As I said, we'll evaluate Mr. Hayes's physical capacity in the next few days. If he seems strong enough, we won't stand in the way." "That's all I needed to hear," Camille replied, triumphant. "I'll let the staff know. Oh, and Jonathan, there are some documents from your philanthropic fund you might want to review soon. Just housekeeping matters." She tossed a pointed look at Sophia. "Philanthropy can be a slippery slope if you're not careful about where your money goes." With that, she left, her heels clicking decisively down the hallway. Sophia turned to Jonathan, biting her lip. She must suspect something. He shook his head, though he looked weary. "Camille's suspicious of anyone who might steal me away, personally or financially." Then he pinched the bridge of his nose. "We'll just keep our business about the orphanage discreet. Once the papers are signed, it won't matter what she thinks." By mid-afternoon, the physical therapist arrived, a soft-spoken woman named Lynn who specialized in post-coma mobility. Sophia sat in the corner of the suite, taking notes while Lynn worked Jonathan through a series of gentle exercises. He winced often, beads of sweat gathering at his temples, but he pushed through each task with stoic resolve. Lynn's encouraging voice filled the quiet. "That's it. Good. Just one more stretch. Slowly. Perfect." Finally, she gave a satisfied nod. "He's doing well, Dr. Walker. Better than expected." Jonathan, breathing heavily, managed a grin. "Give me a week. I'll be running marathons." Lynn laughed. "Let's aim for walking down the hallway first. Baby steps." Once the session ended, Sophia helped Jonathan settle back into bed, hooking him up to a mild IV drip to replenish fluids. "Rest now," she said, smoothing the blanket. "You'll feel the soreness tomorrow. Let me handle the chaos outside." But Jonathan grabbed her wrist gently. "Wait, about that orphanage. Can you gather whatever documents Sister Agnes has? I'll sign them as soon as I wake. We can wire funds to a safe account that'll reflect immediate solvency." Sophia felt a rush of gratitude. "Of course, I'll call her right away." He released her hand and closed his eyes, as though already drifting off. The effort of therapy, plus the emotional weight of the day, had drained him. She quietly stepped out, letting him rest. In the corridor, she dialed Sister Agnes. Her own pulse throbbed with cautious optimism. The phone rang once, twice, and then the elderly nun's voice crackled onto the line. "Sister, it's Sophia," she said, keeping her voice low. "I have good news. Jonathan wants to help immediately. He'll sign whatever official documents you have to show the city council proof of funds. He just needs you to send them to me." A tearful laugh burst through from the other side. "Oh, bless you, child. I've got a typed sponsorship request and the orphanage's financial records. I can send scans to your email. Would that suffice?" "Yes, perfect," Sophia answered. "I'll print them here. Then, once he signs, we can submit them to the council before the weekend. hopefully stopping their closure process. She could practically hear Sister Agnes crossing herself in relief. "You're a miracle, Sophia. And that man? He's a miracle too. Tell him the children are praying for him day and night." A rush of warmth filled Sophia's chest. "I will. Let's make this happen quickly, sister." Half an hour later, Sophia was in the mansion's small study, printing off the orphanage documents. The antique desk creaked under the weight of business files, most of them from Jonathan's empire. She carefully organized the pages from Sister Agnes, a short introduction about the orphanage's history, its mission, the financial shortfall, and a formal request for sponsorship. All quite straightforward. Just as she was slipping them into a neat folder, footsteps echoed on the marble floor behind her. She turned to see Clark, the attorney, peering in curiously. "Dr. Walker," he said, clearing his throat, "are you authorized to be in Mr. Hayes's study? Some of these documents are quite sensitive." Her pulse skipped. "Oh, I'm only printing something personal for Mr. Hayes. He asked me to. It's about a philanthropic matter." Clark raised an eyebrow. "Philanthropy, you say? Mr. Hayes has several philanthropic arms, but I wasn't informed of any new disbursement." Sophia shut off the printer, hoping she didn't look too guilty. "Yes, well, he'll fill you in if he chooses to. He asked for confidentiality." The attorney's gaze grew more pointed. "I see. In that case, I'll respect his wishes. Just remember, Dr. Walker, any large financial moves usually require my legal oversight." He paused. "If Mr. Hayes tries to push a sudden sum out of a particular account, it might raise flags among certain board members, or Ms. Travers." Sophia's stomach tightened. "I understand, but it's not a massive corporate matter, just a personal donation. You'll see the details when the time comes." Without another word, Clark turned and left. Sophia exhaled slowly, feeling as if every step of this plan was monitored under a microscope. She gathered the papers, careful not to leave even a stray staple behind, and headed out. She approached Jonathan's suite, slipping in quietly, expecting to find him still dozing. Instead, she saw Camille perched on the edge of his bed, flipping through a tablet with one hand while the other rested possessively on Jonathan's shoulder. Sophia froze, pressing the folder against her chest as if it were a shield. "Ah, Dr. Walker," Camille greeted with disarming sweetness. "Jonathan and I were just discussing the philanthropic fund. We might incorporate some of our upcoming events' proceeds into a charity aspect." Her eyes flicked to the folder in Sophia's arms. "Are those more documents?" Jonathan, looking less than thrilled, spoke up with a note of forced calm. "Camille suggests we add a donation drive at the party, something to show we're giving back. I told her we'd consider it, but first I have other philanthropic priorities." A tiny muscle jumped in Camille's jaw. "Of course." Then, smoothly shifting topics, she asked, "Dr. Walker, any update on his health? Will he be ready for the event in a few days?" Sophia set down the folder, carefully avoiding mention of the orphanage. "We're taking it day by day. Mr. Hayes made a lot of progress with therapy, but we can't push him too far. If he needs rest, the event will have to be postponed." She braced for an argument, but to her surprise, Camille gave a gracious nod. "Absolutely. I only want him safe. I've actually arranged a full spa team to visit tomorrow. Massage therapists, a dietitian, even a private meditation instructor. Anything to speed up his recovery, yes?" Jonathan looked overwhelmed, but he simply muttered, "Thanks, Camille. We'll see if that helps." Sophia gathered her courage. "Mr. Hayes, if you feel up to it later, there's a small document for you to sign, something you mentioned earlier. But if you're tired..." He straightened, catching her meaning. "Right. Yes. I'd like to do that. After dinner, maybe. We can talk in private." Camille's gaze sharpened. "A document? For what?" Sophia kept her expression neutral. "Just some general medical release forms I brought from the hospital to finalize his follow-up appointments." It was partly true. She always had forms on hand for official record. She prayed it would be enough to deflect Camille's curiosity. "Oh, I see." Camille's smile was a practiced, cat-like grin. "Carry on, then." The hours crawled by. Jonathan dozed again around late afternoon, drained by the parade of well-meaning staff and his short business updates. Camille was called away for a phone conference. Clark busied himself with new files in the library. Sophia recognized an opportunity. She retrieved the sponsorship papers from a secure spot in her own room, then crept back to Jonathan's suite. The nurse on duty stepped aside, aware that Dr. Walker had top authority over his care. Inside, soft lamplight bathed the room. Jonathan was awake, staring at the swirling patterns on the ceiling as if deep in thought. "Doctor," he murmured, noticing her entrance. "Is it time?" She nodded, shutting the door behind her. "I have the documents from Sister Agnes. They're straightforward. Just a letter of intent promising a donation large enough to wipe the orphanage's debts. The council needs to see your signature and proof of a transfer before they cancel the closure." He carefully pushed himself upright, wincing. She offered him a pen, her heart pounding. "We can move the funds via a personal account, the one that's not under your corporate name. That might keep it quieter. I know Clark usually handles these transactions, but we might manage it ourselves, just a single wire. Then the letter becomes official." Jonathan paused, looking at the pages. "I trust you. Let's do it." He began scrawling his signature where indicated. Sophia held her breath. Each stroke of the pen felt monumental. Then, with one final flourish, he set the pen aside. A wave of relief threatened to make her knees buckle. She lifted the pages, scanning them quickly to ensure all was in order. "That's it," she breathed, eyes stinging with gratitude. "I'll take care of the transfer next. The orphanage. You've given them a second chance." He gave a weary half-smile. "Just promise me this isn't going to undermine my health that you worry about so much." "Not at all," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is exactly the kind of hope and purpose you need, I think." But as she carefully tucked the papers into a folder, her mind buzzed with worries about secrecy. Would Clark or Camille discover this donation before it was processed? Could they block it? Claiming Jonathan wasn't of sound mind or using the Hayes estate irresponsibly? The signed documents felt like the key to saving those children, yet also a potential flashpoint if revealed too soon. She locked eyes with Jonathan, wanting to say more, but he looked exhausted. "I'll handle the wire transfer discreetly," she promised quietly. "You just focus on resting." He nodded, laying his head back against the pillows. "Thank you, Sophia." Later that night, as the household settled and security lights flickered across the garden, Sophia found a secure laptop in the study. Using the account information Jonathan had provided and a small authentication device he'd retrieved from his personal belongings, she managed to initiate the transfer of $200,000 to the orphanage's designated account. A screen message confirmed the process. It was done. Her heart soared at the thought of Sister Agnes's joy and the children's relief. She emailed the proof of funds to the nun and attached a digital copy of Jonathan's signed letter, advising her to immediately inform the council. Exiting the study, she felt as though she'd finally broken a suffocating chain. She made her way upstairs, folder pressed tight to her chest, determined to keep it hidden until the final steps were confirmed. But just as she reached the dimly lit corridor that led to her guest room, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was the same shape, the same silhouette she'd glimpsed before, tall, broad-shouldered. Instantly her senses flared with alarm. He moved quietly, blocking her path. In the faint glow of a wall sconce, she recognized him as one of the drivers, often at Camille's side. His face was expressionless. "Excuse me," Sophia managed, trying to edge past. He didn't budge. A tense moment passed. Then the driver spoke in a low voice. "Ms. Travers would like a word. Now." Sophia's heart thundered. So Camille had indeed placed a watchdog on her. Did Camille suspect the real nature of the papers? She steadied herself. "It's late. If Ms. Travers needs to talk, She can come see me in the morning. Ms. Travers said now, he repeated, his tone icy. If you please? Swallowing her fear, Sophia realized she had no immediate escape. She slipped the orphanage folder discreetly under her arm, pulling her coat over it. Fine, she said, forcing calm. Lead the way. With that, the driver turned and guided her down a side corridor, the mansion's lights casting long, ominous shadows on the marble floors. Sophia followed, each step echoing with dread. She clung to the hope that Jonathan's signature and the wire transfer had already secured the orphanage's future, no matter what confrontation lay ahead. Because from the look of the driver's rigid posture and the mention of Camille's summons, it was clear that trouble lurked just beyond that corridor's final door. The corridor was silent except for the echo of footsteps, Sophia's and the driver's, as they advanced deeper into the mansion's less frequented wing. It struck Sophia how different this route felt. It wasn't the grand, bright hallway leading to Jonathan's recovery suite, nor the cozy path to the library. The lights overhead were dimmed, the walls lined with paintings that seemed to peer down with silent disapproval. Sophia clutched her folder discreetly under her arm. She hadn't been prepared for an immediate confrontation with Camille, especially not in the middle of the night. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized this was exactly Camille's style, pulling strings from the shadows, controlling situations on her own terms. Each step filled Sophia with fresh waves of anxiety. If Camille found out about the newly signed documents, the donation that Jonathan had just pushed through, how would she respond? At the end of the corridor, the driver paused in front of double doors carved with elaborate motifs of vines and roses. He knocked twice, then waited. A muffled voice said, "Come in," and he opened the doors, gesturing for Sophia to step inside. She entered what appeared to be a private salon or sitting room. Deep burgundy drapes covered tall windows, and the faint scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light in the center of the room, illuminating a velvet chaise lounge. There sat Camille Travers, dressed in a flowing robe of silver satin, her posture regal, ankles crossed elegantly. Even in that relaxed attire, she looked ready for a business negotiation or a polite duel, whichever came first. "Dr. Walker," Camille said in a measured tone, nodding curtly, "I appreciate you coming at this hour." Sophia offered a tight smile, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't have much choice." The driver quietly closed the doors behind them, leaving the two women alone. Camille gestured to an armchair across from her. "Please, sit. We have things to discuss." Sophia hesitated, then sank onto the chair, trying to keep her posture calm. She placed the folder on her lap, making sure the cover faced down. Although the transfer was already made, the signed sponsorship letter was still inside, and she dreaded Camille's reaction if she discovered it. Camille leaned forward, resting her forearms on her knees. Her voice dropped to a cool hush. "I'm not going to waste time. For days I've sensed a secrecy between you and Jonathan. He's never been one to hide important financial moves from his inner circle. Yet now I catch whispers about a sudden personal donation, and he grows guarded whenever I inquire." Sophia's heart pounded in her ears, but she kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Hayes is an adult with autonomy. If he chooses to make personal donations to an orphanage?" Camille cut in with a raised eyebrow. "Yes, I'm aware of that story. Did you think I wouldn't do a little digging?" She gave a brittle laugh. "You see, my dear doctor, the staff here is loyal to me in many ways, especially those who were uncertain whether your presence signaled some ulterior motive." Sophia's pulse jolted. So it was more than suspicion. Camille had truly begun investigating. Even the hush-hush wire transfer might have left a digital footprint among the staff who oversaw Jonathan's finances. "It's not an ulterior motive," she said, swallowing her frustration. "It's a worthy cause, and he wanted to help of his own free will." Camille tilted her head. "Is that so? Or did you feed him a sob story while he was still half drugged, half lucid in the hospital, making him believe this was the best way to repay you for saving his life? She leaned back, eyes narrowing. Your talk of philanthropic altruism is charming, but let's be honest, $200,000 is hardly pocket change, even for Jonathan, given his current state and the legal tangles around his estate. Why not be transparent about it if there's nothing to hide? Sophia fought the urge to snap back. Instead, she steadied her voice. Jonathan was free to tell you. He didn't because he feared you'd cast doubt on his decision. And from the way you're reacting now, can you blame him? Camille rose from the lounge gracefully, crossing the space in a few measured steps. A faint tension showed in the set of her shoulders. She moved to a small bar cart, poured a splash of amber-colored liquid into a crystal glass. I suppose he's always had a soft spot for grand gestures, she said, swirling the drink absently. He told me once he believed in rescuing things, broken companies, failing institutions, lost souls. I suspect you discovered that streak and used it. Sophia shook her head, anger simmering. Believe what you want. I never pressured him. The orphanage was in crisis. He asked how he could help, so I told him. That's all. Camille downed a swallow of the liquor, then returned her gaze to Sophia. Whether or not you pressured him, you realize what this looks like to the outside world? A private caretaker influencing a fragile billionaire to sign over money. If the board catches wind of this, or if certain people want to interpret it maliciously, they could claim Jonathan was manipulated while mentally and physically weak. The menace behind her words wasn't subtle. Sophia felt a chill. He's not incompetent, nor is he out of his mind. He was declared fit enough to make decisions by his lead physician upon leaving the hospital. And I'm not some con artist, Ms. Travers. Camille set her glass on a side table with a decisive click. I see your indignation. Let me be perfectly clear. I could, if I chose, raise a ruckus that would tie this donation up in legal knots for months, maybe indefinitely. All I'd have to do is claim undue influence or claim he lacked clarity after such a prolonged coma. Her lips curved in a half-smile. I won't do that unless forced, because I don't wish to hurt Jonathan. But make no mistake, if you challenge me, I'll protect him from anything I deem suspicious, even if that means dismantling your entire plan. Sophia's hands clenched around the folder. What do you want, then? To revoke the donation and let an orphanage close down? Hardly. Camille's tone turned almost bored. I'm not a monster, Doctor. If Jonathan truly wants to help your, what is it called, Sunnybrook Orphanage? Fine. I'm not here to snatch food from starving children, but I do want to ensure that everything remains properly managed. Fury flashed behind Sophia's eyes. She forced herself to speak calmly. It's Sister Agnes's orphanage. All funds will be used transparently. There's no mismanagement. You're welcome to review the finances if you want. She paused, then added, though it's not actually your right. This is Jonathan's choice. A short silence fell. Camille watched Sophia with an almost clinical detachment. The grandmother clock in the corner ticked away seconds, each one heavier than the last. Finally, Camille offered a slim nod. Let's speak plainly. I will let this donation stand, but only under two conditions. Sophia's heartbeat hammered in her throat. Which are? Camille ticked them off on her manicured fingertips. First, you give me written confirmation that you approached Jonathan for assistance only after the hospital declared him mentally competent. If you can't provide that, I'll request the hospital's official notes. And second, she took a breath, letting her words hang. Second, you keep me fully informed of every subsequent philanthropic plan, especially if it involves your orphanage. No secret transactions. No hush-hush backdoor deals. Sophia bristled. And if I refuse? Camille's smile hardened. If you refuse, I'll file a formal complaint with the Hayes Board of Trustees, stating that Jonathan has been unduly pressured into a donation while still physically and psychologically compromised. They can freeze or investigate the funds. The negative press alone could bury your orphanage in red tape for months, far longer than you can afford. I doubt Sister Agnes has the resources to fight a legal battle over suspicious charity deals. Do you? It was a trap. Camille might not relish harming the children, but she would do anything to keep control of Jonathan's finances, or at least to ensure no one else had undue influence. Realizing the precarious position, Sophia fought back tears of frustration. "Fine," she breathed, voice shaky. "I'll provide whatever disclaimers you need, and I'll update you about any future steps related to the orphanage. Just please don't sabotage the donation." Camille studied her quietly, perhaps noting Sophia's desperation. "Very well," she said. "I'm not out to sabotage. My priority is Jonathan's welfare and ensuring no one exploits him during recovery. If that means letting an orphanage benefit—" She gave a small shrug. "I can live with that." The tension in the room felt like a clamp around Sophia's chest. She wanted to shout that it wasn't exploitation, that she cared deeply for Jonathan's health, had saved his life. But this wasn't about logic or truth to Camille. It was about power, and making sure Sophia knew her place. Camille motioned to the driver who'd been standing guard near the door. "Have a seat, Miss Travers?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "That won't be necessary. I think Dr. Walker and I have an understanding." She turned back to Sophia. "We're done here. The hour is late and Jonathan needs stability. If you care for his well-being, you'll not burden him with unnecessary details or encourage him to hide anything else from me." Sophia rose from the armchair, folder tucked protectively under her arm. "Mr. Hayes is an adult," she repeated, voice tight. "He makes his own choices, but I hear your concerns." Camille's features softened a fraction, as though the tension had eased for her too. "I'll expect that documentation tomorrow. Good night, Doctor." Sophia exited the salon, her heart thudding violently in her chest. She longed for fresh air, but the driver trailed behind her until she turned down the corridor to her guest room, ensuring she went straight to her quarters. Only when the door clicked shut behind her did Sophia exhale in relief. Setting the folder on the dresser, she pressed her palms flat against it, as if to anchor herself to reality. The donation was real, the wire transfer presumably unstoppable at this point. The orphanage should be safe. Yet Camille's ultimatum left an ugly knot of fear in her gut. One complaint from her, and the boards or courts could tie up Jonathan's finances with accusations of manipulation. Sister Agnes wouldn't stand a chance in a corporate legal war. Sliding onto the edge of her bed, Sophia let her shoulders sag. She could produce a quick letter stating that she approached Jonathan only after the hospital confirmed his full capacity, a matter of fact, since it happened days after he was formally discharged from ICU. But the second condition, keeping Camille informed about any future steps, felt like handing over the orphanage's future to a woman who might sabotage it at any turn. She thought of Jonathan, how he'd said this was about doing something that truly mattered. He'd been so resolute. Sophia didn't want to involve him in this argument with Camille. It would only increase his stress, possibly stall his recovery. If Camille carried out her threat, it would make him feel guilty or betrayed. So, for now, Sophia decided she'd swallow her pride and comply with Camille's demands, at least until the orphanage was officially safe. But a nagging voice in the back of her mind warned that Camille's demands wouldn't stop here. Today, it was about the orphanage donation. Tomorrow, it might be anything else she deemed secret or suspicious. The more Jonathan improved, the more complicated his life became. Boardroom battles, lawsuits, corporate expansions, and now personal entanglements with an ex-fiancé who had her own hidden agenda. Was this just the beginning of a deeper conflict? She slipped under the covers, fully dressed, eyes wide open. The mansion had grown quiet, but she couldn't lull herself to sleep. Every cell in her body ached with tension. She pictured Sister Agnes's relieved face when she heard the donation was in progress. That was enough to keep her from regretting the confrontation. The orphans would be safe, no matter what the cost was to Sophia's peace of mind. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her. She drifted off, a swirl of uneasy dreams crowding her thoughts. Nightmares of legal battles, visions of children crying in an empty orphanage, and the ever-present shadow of Camille looming, watchful, ready to strike at the slightest misstep. In the darkest hours before dawn, she woke with a gasp. The room was still. A single beam of moonlight fell through the window. Clutching her chest, she steadied her breathing. The folder on the dresser remained exactly where she'd left it, physical proof of the promise Jonathan had made, a promise that, come what may, would not be undone. And for that, she told herself, it was worth facing every threat that might arise in the days to come. Morning arrived in a slow haze, the watery sunlight creeping through the tall windows of Sophia's guest room. After the tense midnight confrontation with Camille, she'd barely managed a few hours of restless sleep. The swirling dreams of sabotage, accusations, and threatened lawsuits had left her mind foggy. Yet the knowledge of the successful wire transfer, the orphanage's lifeline, still brought a measure of relief. It was done. Even if Camille tried to stir trouble, the funds had already reached Sister Agnes, and the legal closure notice would be thwarted. Pulling herself out of bed, Sophia freshened up quickly, then grabbed a sheet of blank paper from the room's small writing desk. She'd promised to provide Camille with a written statement confirming that Jonathan had made his decision after being deemed medically competent. Sophia found herself crafting the note with a precision that stung her pride. It felt demeaning to even write such a thing, like a child proving innocence, but it was necessary to keep Camille off the orphanage's back. She composed the letter. To whom it may concern, I, Dr. Sophia Walker, confirm that Jonathan Hayes has been mentally and medically cleared by Riverside General Hospital's lead physicians to make decisions pertaining to his personal finances. The conversation regarding his charitable donation to the Sunnybrook Orphanage occurred after his discharge and was made of his own accord without external pressure or compromise of his mental capacity. Signed, Dr. Sophia Walker. Reading it over, she sighed. This was exactly the type of document Camille would cherish, using it like a shield against any accusations of undue influence. Yet if it protected the children, so be it. She left her room intending to deliver the note to Camille's staff. On her way through the corridor, she found Jonathan's door slightly ajar. Muffled voices drifted out, Clark's distinctive timbre plus Jonathan's quieter responses. Instinct whispered that she should check on Jonathan before heading off to see Camille. Stepping to the threshold, she tapped lightly. Clark's voice paused. Jonathan, from his bed, called out, "Come in!" Sophia entered, noticing a small swirl of tension in the air. Clark stood near a portable desk that had been set up with a laptop, scanning through what looked like financial statements. Jonathan, propped against pillows, had a faint sheen of sweat on his brow, likely from the stress of the conversation. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Clark cleared his throat. "We're discussing some complications in Mr. Hayes's accounts. A rather large sum was withdrawn recently, $200,000. He shot a pointed look at Sophia, then turned back to Jonathan. Some of the junior accountants flagged it because the request bypassed certain corporate oversight protocols. Sophia's stomach went cold. She had tried to be discreet, using Jonathan's personal account, but apparently even that triggered caution among the staff who monitored the Hayes empire. She braced herself for Clark's barrage of questions. Jonathan raised a hand as though to say he had this under control. "I authorized that withdrawal personally," he told Clark, "and I did it from an account that belongs to me, not the board or the main philanthropic trust. There's nothing irregular." Clark nodded stiffly. "Understood, Mr. Hayes. However, you should know Ms. Travers has also expressed some concern about unauthorized moves." He glanced again at Sophia, but in a less confrontational manner. "Given your condition, any significant transactions might come under scrutiny. I'm just trying to protect you, sir." Sophia kept her gaze on Jonathan, wishing she could convey an apology for the trouble. But he simply said, "I appreciate your diligence, Clark. If the board or Ms. Travers asks, inform them that it's a personal donation, not subject to corporate veto, and—" he sighed, "and if they're not satisfied, they can speak to me directly. This is not up for debate." It was a decisive statement, reminiscent of the old, authoritative Jonathan Hayes. Even Clark seemed mollified, bowing his head slightly. "Very well, Mr. Hayes. I'll note that in the records." He gathered his papers. "Let's finish reviewing the other items later. For now, I'll let you rest." Once Clark stepped out, Sophia approached Jonathan's bedside. She could see in his face the aftershocks of frustration. He might be physically fragile, but the outside world was pressing him hard. "Thank you for defending the donation," she said softly. He managed a tight smile. "Well, we knew there could be friction. At least we got out in front of it." Then he frowned. "Have you spoken to Camille? She's been probing me about that money for days, and this morning she mentioned some letter you were going to provide." Sophia nodded, feeling heat creep up her neck. "Last night she confronted me. She demanded assurance I hadn't manipulated you. I wrote up a short statement, purely a formality." Jonathan's eyes flashed with anger. "She had no right to bully you into that. I'm sorry." "It's all right," Sophia said, though her voice quivered slightly. "She says she won't block the donation if I affirm your competence. It's worth swallowing my pride if it means protecting the orphanage from legal stalls." She reached into her coat pocket, retrieving the folded letter. "I was about to bring this to her or her staff." Jonathan accepted the note, scanned it quickly. A bitter chuckle escaped him. "Ironic how the woman I once planned to marry is now forcing such formalities. But if it makes everything simpler, so be it." He handed it back. "Go ahead. She'll likely file it among her personal records or show it to the board if they question her." Sophia studied him, noting the fatigue etched in his features. "Are you okay? This all seems so overwhelming." He lowered his eyes. "I won't lie, it is. But I'm determined not to let this tear me down. I only woke up a short while ago, and I already feel buried under business demands, old relationship baggage, lawsuits. It's exhausting." He inhaled slowly. But helping that orphanage was one thing that felt unambiguously right. The sincerity in his words stirred a wave of gratitude within Sophia. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll handle Camille from here. You just focus on your therapy and on regaining strength." She found Camille in the East Wing's drawing room, a space with pale blue walls, crystal chandeliers, and plush sofas arranged around a gleaming piano. Camille sat near a window, flipping through a magazine while a staff member fussed with fresh flowers in a tall vase. At Sophia's entrance, Camille flicked her gaze up. "Ah, Dr. Walker," she said, marking her place in the magazine. "I was told you'd be coming." Sophia approached, letter in hand, noticing how the staff member discreetly slipped out of the room. She cleared her throat. "I brought the statement you requested." Camille set the magazine aside, extending her hand. "Let's see." Sophia placed the folded page on a small side table, stepping back to give Camille her space. Camille picked it up, eyes roving over the words. As she read, her expression remained unreadable, a calm mask. Once finished, she nodded, tucking the paper into her robe's pocket. "That's acceptable. Thank you." Sophia hoped that would be the end of it, but Camille's next words shattered that hope. "You should know that I've arranged a meeting with the Hayes board in 3 days. It'll be a preliminary session to discuss Jonathan's capacity to resume leadership. They're on edge about whether his decisions can be trusted, especially with all these unusual transactions." She said the phrase pointedly, though not accusingly. "Unusual?" Sophia repeated, bristling. "Donating to charity is hardly unusual." Camille shrugged. "Not unusual for Jonathan, but the timing is suspect. The board is used to a man who methodically reviews philanthropic proposals, never a snap donation. They want to ensure there's no undue influence. Her lips curled in a thin line. I'll show them your statement if needed, but don't be surprised if you're called upon to reaffirm it. Sophia's pulse thudded. Testifying before the board would be an unwelcome escalation, yet she saw no choice but to nod. I'll do whatever it takes to ensure the donation stands. Camille rose, approaching the tall windows that overlooked the sprawling gardens. The day was bright, a gentle breeze swaying the hedges. Well, I suppose we've resolved that for now. She glanced over her shoulder, golden light catching in her dark hair. And Dr. Walker, I trust we have an understanding. No more secret maneuvers. If Jonathan needs something, come to me, and we'll handle it together. Duly noted, Sophia said, hoping her voice sounded steady. She turned to leave, aware that each step felt heavier. Camille might have momentarily backed off from blocking the donation, but the looming board meeting threatened a whole new wave of complications for Jonathan's autonomy and for the orphanage's security. By midday, a new storm front seemed to be gathering. The entire household buzzed with references to an upcoming event. A recovery gala, as some staffers called it, an intimate evening where select business allies, a few philanthropic partners, and top associates would be invited to see Jonathan in person. Camille wanted it done in a matter of days, perhaps to coincide with the board meeting. Reassure them, she repeated to anyone who would listen, that Jonathan is back and better than ever. For Sophia, the plan sounded like a guaranteed recipe for stress. She tried to steer Jonathan away from the idea, emphasizing that he was still building stamina, that his therapy was ongoing. But Jonathan seemed torn. Part of him wanted to push back, to keep resting and avoid the spotlight. Another part, perhaps the old CEO side, knew the board's doubts wouldn't vanish unless he proved himself physically present and mentally sharp. As the staff prepared decorations, arranged a small orchestra, and debated a menu, Sophia caught glimpses of Jonathan in his wheelchair, being escorted by a private nurse through one of the mansion's great halls. His posture was tense, his features drawn, as though he was bracing for a performance he didn't want to star in. That afternoon, she approached him. "Jonathan," she said gently, "you don't have to do this. Your recovery is more important than some PR exercise." He looked at her, lines of worry etched around his eyes. "I know, but the board is already suspicious. Clark told me about the hush-hush pre-meeting Camille arranged. If they see me uncertain or reclusive, they might pressure me into stepping aside. That would mean handing over the entire empire, my life's work, to people who don't share my priorities, including any philanthropic direction." Sophia's heart sank. She understood then that Jonathan wasn't just battling for personal pride. He was defending the influence that would allow him to keep helping others, not just the orphanage, but many other ventures he'd once championed. "I see," she murmured. "So the event is to show them you're still in charge." He nodded, exhaling. "Exactly. If I appear confident, if I speak clearly about the future, I can settle them down. Then we can move forward without so many eyes second-guessing every donation or business move." Reluctantly, Sophia accepted his logic. "If that's your decision, I'll support you. But we need to pace your activities carefully. Overdoing it could cause a relapse, physically or mentally." Jonathan offered a weary smile. "Doctor's orders. I promise I'll do only as much as I can handle." 2 days passed in a blur of appointments and hushed phone calls. The hush around the mansion grew taut as staff scurried with last-minute preparations, scheduling the catering service, setting up a stage for a brief speech, and even bringing in fresh floral arrangements daily. Camille oversaw everything with a practiced eye, ensuring each detail exuded the right balance of understated elegance and powerful statement. During this time, Sister Agnes phoned Sophia repeatedly with updates on the orphanage's future. The check had cleared, the city council was in the process of reversing the closure notice, and the children were practically rejoicing at the thought they could remain in their home. Each call rekindled Sophia's determination to ensure Jonathan's health didn't collapse under the weight of these external pressures. Late on the second evening, she found Jonathan in his room dozing fitfully after a stressful day of meeting with a small group of board members who had come early to visit. She checked his vitals. His pulse was slightly elevated, but not alarmingly so. His temperature was normal, yet his expression, even in restless sleep, was pinched with tension. Quietly, she stood by the window, gazing at the reflection of the bedroom in the dark glass. In the faint lamplight, she caught her own silhouette. Tired eyes, posture stiff from days of bracing for conflict. She realized how deeply she cared not only about the orphanage but about Jonathan himself, his well-being, his ability to find peace amid the chaos swirling around him. Maybe once this event is over, everything will calm down, she whispered to her reflection. But a small voice in her mind contested that hope. Camille's ambition, the board's scrutiny, the lawsuits, would any of that truly disappear? Or was this just the beginning of a long, complicated path? She turned away from the window, gently rechecking Jonathan's monitors, her heart softening at the sight of him. He'd begun stirring, half awake, lips parted in a quiet murmur. She leaned in. "Jonathan?" His eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded his gaze, then recognition set in. "Sophia," he managed, his voice hoarse. "What time is it?" "Almost midnight," she said softly. "Everything's fine, just me doing a routine check. Go back to sleep." He rolled his shoulders as though trying to shake off a bad dream. "I was dreaming," he muttered, "about the board, about standing in that big hall trying to speak, but no words came out." Her chest tightened. "It's just anxiety," she assured. "You'll do fine. You already handled some board members today." He nodded vaguely, though the haunted look lingered in his eyes. "Right," he whispered. "It's just so soon. I feel half ready for this, but half terrified." Moved by an urge to comfort, she placed a hand on his forearm, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Remember how you overcame the coma. You woke up stronger than anyone predicted. You'll find the strength to face this, too." To her surprise, he clasped her hand, his grip faintly trembling. "Thank you," he murmured, eyes closed again. "For everything." Heat flooded Sophia's cheeks, and she realized how intimate that small gesture felt in the quiet of his darkened suite. She extricated her hand gently. "Sleep now, Jonathan," she repeated, turning off the lamp, leaving only the soft glow of a nightlight. She stepped away, heading back to her own room, her heart fluttering with conflicting emotions, relief that Jonathan trusted her, worry for the battle he had to fight, and a growing warmth that she struggled to keep strictly professional. It was a precarious line to walk, one that Camille's watchful presence made even more perilous. On the morning of the gala, the mansion's atmosphere was electric. Trucks from catering companies lined the driveway. Musicians arrived carrying instruments in polished cases. Decorators fluttered around, placing centerpieces and adjusting the lighting scheme. Everything was a flurry of whispered instructions and excited tension. Jonathan had a final therapy session with Lynn, followed by a brief check-in with a speech coach, a PR consultant that Camille had hired. The consultant encouraged him to keep his remarks short and direct, focusing on gratitude for everyone's support and a forward-looking vision for the Hayes Empire. Sophia hovered protectively, ensuring Jonathan took breaks, drank water, and didn't exhaust himself. Yet by late afternoon she could tell he was running on nerves. The lines around his eyes hinted at fatigue, and his skin was pale beneath the collar of the tailored suit they'd managed to fit him into. Just as she finished double-checking his vitals, Camille swept in, looking radiant in an evening gown of midnight blue. "Darling," she cooed, stepping over to Jonathan, fussing with his tie. "You look splendid. Everything is prepared. Are you ready to greet our guests?" Jonathan offered a tense smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." Camille, apparently satisfied, glanced at Sophia. "Dr. Walker, do me a favor. Stay close tonight in case Jonathan needs anything, but try not to hover or overshadow him." Sophia bit back a retort. Instead, she nodded. Of course. The caretaker in her wanted to protest the risk, but Jonathan's face was set. He wanted this demonstration of resilience, and nothing short of a major medical crisis would deter him. "I'll be around if you need me," she said to him gently, ignoring Camille's presence for a moment. "Just signal if you feel faint or need to sit down." He gave a brief nod, then allowed Camille to guide him out of the room. The faint strains of a string quartet drifted from the far side of the mansion where the gala was taking shape. Sophia lingered behind for a moment, collecting her stethoscope and small medical kit in case of emergency. Then she followed into the corridor, determination bracing her shoulders. If this was Jonathan's chance to reclaim his voice, she would support him every step. But as she descended the wide marble staircase, she couldn't ignore the nagging sense that something else, something dangerous, lurked beneath the glamorous sheen of this event. Soft violin music drifted across the grand foyer, accompanied by the low hum of conversation and the clink of champagne flutes. The lakeside mansion felt transformed. Golden light bathed every corridor. Fresh flowers added lush bursts of color, and waitstaff in crisp uniforms circulated with silver trays. It was as if, overnight, a quiet convalescence home had been replaced by a stage set for high society. Dr. Sophia Walker paused at the top of the broad marble staircase, momentarily taking in the scene. Below, clusters of well-dressed guests mingled, laughing politely and exchanging the inevitable polite gossip about Jonathan Hayes's miraculous return. Several members of the Hayes board stood in a group near an ornate fireplace discussing business with subdued intensity. Across the room, Camille Travers, resplendent in her midnight blue gown, guided new arrivals into the main parlor with cool efficiency. Every detail of this event seemed to revolve around one goal, proving that Jonathan was once again the charismatic center of the Hayes empire. Sophia exhaled, reminding herself to remain vigilant. She'd promised to keep close watch over Jonathan, who was still far from fully recovered. Though he hid it well, she sensed his lingering weakness, an unsteadiness in his posture, the occasional tightness around his eyes whenever he grew tired or disoriented. Tonight was a performance, and every performance carried the risk of stage fright or collapse behind the scenes. Descending the stairs carefully, Sophia threaded through the crowd until she spotted Jonathan near the grand piano. He sat in a plush chair to conserve energy. A discreet pillow supported his back. Despite that concession, he wore a tailored suit, hair neatly groomed, and an air of dignified composure that made him seem almost the same old Jonathan Hayes from the days before his coma. Several important-looking executives surrounded him, some from his real estate ventures, others from philanthropic boards. They asked him questions in low, urgent tones. Catching her eye, Jonathan gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Sophia approached, staying on the periphery so as not to interrupt. She heard snippets of conversation, a nervous inquiry about an upcoming land deal, a mention of new city regulations. Jonathan responded with measured confidence, though his voice was subdued. Eventually, one of the executives turned and recognized Sophia as Jonathan's personal physician. He offered a polite greeting before drifting away, leaving her a moment alone with her patient. Jonathan inhaled slowly, leaning closer so he could speak over the noise of the party. "You see how they hover?" he murmured, half amused, half exhausted. "I feel like a rare exhibit." Sophia's lips curved in a wry smile. "You're the man of the hour. They want reassurance you're not about to disappear again." Jonathan sighed, shifting in his chair. "I just want to survive the night without looking like I need a hospital bed." Sophia discreetly placed her hand on his wrist, checking his pulse. "Your heart rate is a bit high. Try to pace yourself. If you're feeling lightheaded or in pain, let me know right away." He gave a tired nod, scanning the crowd. "I'll be fine. Go on. Enjoy the party. I'm sure there's a corner somewhere without so many prying eyes." She was about to reply when a silky voice cut in. "Jonathan, darling, here you are." Camille glided forward, a smile firmly in place. She flashed the same smile at Sophia, though it held less warmth. "The mayor and his wife have arrived. They're eager to see how you're faring. Shall I bring them over?" Jonathan pinched the bridge of his nose as though bracing himself. "Yes, I suppose so. Let's not keep them waiting." Sophia took a step back, acknowledging that Jonathan would now be pulled into another swirl of handshakes and conversation. Camille flicked a glance in Sophia's direction, something like a silent warning not to interfere, before guiding Jonathan's attention elsewhere. Sophia slipped away, searching for a vantage point from which she could monitor him without crowding. The next hour passed in a blur of pleasantries. Every time Sophia looked up, she saw new arrivals greeting Jonathan, patting his arm, or introducing themselves in hopes of a reacquaintance. Standing near the edges of the parlor, she noticed Clark, Jonathan's attorney, quietly speaking with a pair of board members. She recognized them from the day they made an unannounced visit. They were mid-level but influential in the corporate structure, exactly the type to sow doubt or shift alliances if they suspected Jonathan was weak. Occasionally, she caught bits of conversation that drifted her way. "Remarkable recovery, so soon. Are we sure he's not pushing it?" "Last year's expansions. Will he still approve them?" "Never expected him to be back in charge. Wonder if Ms. Travers is planning a bigger role." Through it all, the music played on, and servers circulated with hors d'oeuvres. The cozy warmth might have fooled an outsider, but Sophia sensed the tension crackling beneath the polite small talk. This was less of a celebration and more of a test, a performance measured by the board, by the city's power brokers, by journalists disguised as social guests. Every eye was on Jonathan, waiting to see if he would stumble. Needing a moment's break from the crowd, Sophia slipped through a side door into the mansion's east hallway. She breathed in the quiet, dimly lit space with relief. Her mind roamed to the orphanage. Sister Agnes had confirmed that the funds were safe, and the city council was formally rescinding the closure notice. That weight was off her shoulders. Now, if only Jonathan could come through this evening unscathed, maybe the worst would pass. "Dr. Walker!" A voice echoed down the corridor. She turned to see Clark approaching, his expression guarded. He inclined his head in greeting. "You must be relieved that Mr. Hayes is able to stand on his own, so to speak." Sophia managed a small smile. "Yes, though I worry about him overdoing it." Clark nodded. "So do I. Look, I wanted to give you a heads up. The board is meeting in a few days to discuss Jonathan's official capacity. Camille scheduled it, but rumor has it some members are pushing for a partial transfer of authority, maybe naming a co-chair or an interim executive if they doubt Jonathan's stamina." Sophia's heart clenched. "But that's not necessary. He's showing he can handle responsibilities, just carefully." "I agree. But these men have known a Jonathan Hayes who was unstoppable, juggling deals from morning until midnight. Seeing him in a wheelchair, still recovering, is shaking their confidence." Clark sighed, rubbing his temples. "One or two might suggest that Ms. Travers be granted power to sign off on deals or manage finances until Jonathan is fully healthy." Sophia swallowed. That scenario would be a nightmare for Jonathan, and for any philanthropic endeavor that Camille didn't personally endorse. "Have you told him about this?" Clark lowered his voice. "I tried, but he brushed it off, saying tonight would prove he's capable. He's pinned a lot on this event. If it goes poorly, the board may pounce." Sophia pressed her back against the wall, realizing again just how high the stakes were. "Then we need to ensure it doesn't go poorly." Before she could say more, the strains of music intensified, a sign that the performance portion of the evening might be starting. Clark excused himself politely, heading back to the main hall. Sophia followed, worry tightening like a band around her chest. Sure enough, in the grand parlor, the string quartet had moved aside, leaving a small makeshift stage area. A hush of anticipation fell over the guests. Jonathan was seated off to one side with Camille standing at the center of attention. She tapped a spoon against a glass to gather quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camille said, voice carrying smoothly over the hush, "I want to welcome you all to the Lakeside Mansion. We gather tonight in celebration of Jonathan Hayes's remarkable recovery, but also in celebration of the future we'll shape together. The future of the Hayes Empire and its unwavering commitment to the city and beyond." There was a gentle ripple of applause. Jonathan, sitting with his cane at one side, mustered a gracious smile. Camille extended a hand, beckoning him to join her. The hush deepened, every eye on Jonathan as he rose carefully from the chair, leaning a moment on the cane for balance. A brief flash of pain crossed his face, but he masked it with a determined tilt of his chin. He made it to the front, ignoring the subtle swirl of anxiety that must have accompanied each step. Standing side by side with Camille, he looked composed in his tailored suit, though Sophia could see the slight tremor in his left hand. "Thank you all for coming," Jonathan began, voice deeper than usual, resonating in the hush. "I owe many of you a great deal of gratitude. While I was away, you kept the business moving, watched over the philanthropic projects, and ensured that the Hayes name remained honorable. Tonight I want to reaffirm my commitment to that legacy." Small applause broke out, but it died quickly, leaving an expectant silence. Jonathan continued, each breath carefully measured. "I won't pretend my recovery is complete. It's not. I have work to do, both physically and in bridging the gap between what was and what is. But I want all of you to know that I'm ready to resume active leadership. My mind is clear, my priorities unchanged." A bigger round of applause erupted. Sophia watched from the edge of the crowd, heart in her throat. She willed him to keep the speech short, no sense pushing himself beyond reason. Sure enough, Jonathan seemed prepared to hand the floor back to Camille, but one of the board members, a sharp-eyed man named Peterson, spoke up loudly from the front row. "We're glad to see you upright, Jonathan," he said, "but some of us are concerned about the pace of your return. Are you truly ready to make swift decisions again, especially if new deals demand it?" The question hung awkwardly in the air, a direct challenge that cut through the polite veneer. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jonathan's posture stiffened. "I appreciate your concern, Peterson," he replied, "but I've always believed clarity of mind matters more than physical stamina. My coma might have paused me physically, but it never stole my understanding of this company." A few heads nodded in agreement. Still, Peterson persisted. "Yet we've seen unusual expenditures, one philanthropic donation in particular. We all support good causes, but it felt abrupt with no discussion or usual due diligence. Why the rush?" Sophia's chest went cold. She felt the eyes of several guests flick her way. She prayed Jonathan wouldn't be forced into naming the orphanage right now. He gave a faint cough, tension in his jaw. "Some decisions come from the heart, Peterson. I won't apologize for that. I remain confident it was the right thing to do." Peterson opened his mouth to continue, but Camille stepped forward, placing a light hand on Jonathan's arm. "Let's not turn a celebration into a board meeting," she said with a practiced, soothing laugh. "We'll have ample time to discuss internal matters at the formal session next week. For tonight, let's toast to Jonathan's health and the bright future ahead." Her intervention diffused the moment, drawing applause from guests who were relieved to see tension sidestepped. Jonathan exhaled, grateful, though Sophia noticed the new sheen of sweat on his brow. He offered a final thank you, then allowed Camille to guide him off the small stage, back toward his seat. Sophia slipped through the crowd, intercepting him before the next wave of well-wishers. "You did great," she whispered, her voice reassuring. "But maybe take a break now. Your pulse is racing." He gave a shaky nod, leaning heavily on the cane. "Yes, let's find somewhere quieter." Camille, overhearing, nodded in agreement. "I'll handle the guests." Jonathan, please go catch your breath." She smiled, though her eyes flickered with some hidden thought. Then she turned away to greet a local dignitary who had just walked up. Sophia led Jonathan through a side door into a smaller lounge well away from the main throng of partygoers. He lowered himself onto a velvet sofa, letting out a deep, ragged breath. She checked his pulse, definitely high. Sweat beaded at his temple. "Close your eyes," she instructed gently. "Breathe in for 4 counts, out for 4. Slow and steady." He complied, tension easing from his shoulders. For a minute or two, they existed in that quiet bubble, the distant hum of party conversation muffled by walls, the faint strains of music. Gradually, his heartbeat steadied. "Thank you," he murmured, finally opening his eyes. "You're right. I almost lost my composure up there." "You did fine," she assured. A direct question from the board was inevitable. "But you handled it." He offered a small nod, though his weariness was palpable. "I can't keep up this pace all night. Any more challenges like that, and I might keel over." A faint attempt at humor, but she recognized the raw honesty beneath it. "Then we stay here for a while," Sophia said, glancing at the softly lit lounge. "I'll keep guard if someone tries to haul you back into the fray." Jonathan mustered a hint of a grin. "You're a formidable guardian, Doctor." They shared a moment of mutual warmth, overshadowed by the knowledge that the night wasn't over. Peterson's challenge hinted at more friction to come. The board might be demanding behind the scenes. And Camille, though she'd smoothed the confrontation, might still use it as leverage for the upcoming meeting. Sophia tried to push aside her anxiety. The orphanage was safe, at least. Jonathan had taken a public stand. Perhaps that was enough for one night. Yet a nagging sense told her the show had only just begun, and the real drama waited behind the polished masks of these wealthy power brokers. As if echoing that thought, the door opened a crack. One of the mansion's security staff peered in, apologetic. "Sir, ma'am," he said, addressing both Jonathan and Sophia. "There's been an unexpected visitor at the gate, insisting on seeing Mr. Hayes. Says it's urgent business from the city." A puzzled frown spread across Jonathan's face. At this hour? Sophia felt her pulse lurch. Could it be something else from city officials, or a new lawsuit, or... She steadied her voice. "Who is it exactly?" The guard shrugged. "Didn't catch the name. Just said they're from the municipal office. They claimed it was about a development project, but I couldn't confirm. Should I send them away?" Jonathan exchanged a concerned glance with Sophia. "Maybe it's best to see who they are. I don't want to be blindsided later if it's official city business. Let them in, but bring them somewhere quiet." Sophia helped Jonathan stand, suppressing a wave of trepidation. This gala was meant to be a controlled environment, but now an unknown visitor threatened to upend that fragile control. The hush of the lounge suddenly felt claustrophobic. "All right," she said, voice calm. "Let's go see what they want." They followed the guard out, leaving behind the relative haven of the lounge. The sound of violin music and polite laughter swelled again as they neared the main hallway. Sophia walked close to Jonathan, ready to catch him if his strength faltered. In the pit of her stomach, she sensed a new storm brewing, and after everything that had happened tonight, she feared it might be the kind of storm that shattered all illusions of a smooth recovery for Jonathan Hayes. Jonathan leaned heavily on his cane as he followed the security guard through the main hallway. The polished marble floor reflected the glow of chandeliers overhead, and the hum of party conversation grew faint behind them. Sophia walked at his side, ready to intervene if he showed any sign of distress. Nervous energy crackled in the air, and she sensed that this uninvited visitor could be yet another test of Jonathan's fragile stamina. They reached a smaller foyer near the mansion's side entrance. This area was less ornate, designed more for staff and deliveries than for lavish receptions. One guard stood inside, watching the glass doors that opened to the courtyard. Outside, A figure paced in the dimly lit driveway, holding a slim document case and occasionally glancing up at the building with tense impatience. The guard turned to Jonathan. He refused to give many details, but insisted it was urgent municipal business. "Should I bring him in?" Jonathan exchanged a quick look with Sophia. His expression hardened with determination, but she noticed a flicker of strain in his eyes. Still, he gave a curt nod. "Yes, let's see what's so urgent." The guard opened the door. A rush of cool evening air flowed inside, carrying the faint scent of freshly trimmed hedges. The visitor stepped forward, a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd driven a long way without pause. He clutched a leather briefcase under one arm. He inclined his head politely. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Walter Riley. I'm from the city's Department of Planning and Urban Development. I apologize for coming at an inconvenient time, but I've tried to reach you for days with no response." Jonathan frowned, leaning more on the cane for balance. "A direct city official crashing my event. That must be some urgent matter, Mr. Riley." The man's gaze flicked to Sophia, then back to Jonathan. "Indeed, sir. It concerns certain real estate expansions your company filed for months ago. There's a major development site being re-evaluated by the city council. If we don't finalize negotiations soon, the permit could be revoked. I was told by your office staff that Ms. Travers was handling it, but I've gotten no clarity. And the deadline is, well, imminent." Sophia felt Jonathan's posture tense. Another looming crisis. She gently touched his elbow, offering silent support. He acknowledged her with a small nod and turned his focus to Riley. "Which site are we talking about?" "The Westbridge project," Riley said, opening his briefcase to pull out some official-looking papers. "It's a multi-use redevelopment plan close to an area that's been designated as historical property. Neighbors raised complaints over potential demolition. The city council has been reluctant to push it forward without your official sign-off, but your health issues complicated communication. Now we're days from losing the entire plan if we don't meet certain conditions." Jonathan's face grew serious. Sophia recognized the name Westbridge from the hush of earlier conversations, some ambitious real estate project rumored to yield massive profits if navigated correctly. But it had been on hold since his coma. "I see," Jonathan said, scanning the top page Riley offered. "I remember preliminary discussions. We were concerned about preserving older structures. There was talk of partial heritage status?" Riley gave a tight nod. "Precisely. The local heritage committee intervened. The city wants a clear statement from you. Either commit to preserving those historically significant buildings or withdraw the plan. Without that, they'll revoke the permit on grounds of inactivity and community objections." Jonathan exhaled, massaging his temple. "I can't make such a major call on the spot. My staff and I haven't reviewed the updated proposals or the new demands from the Heritage Committee. Why come here tonight?" Riley's brows knitted in frustration. "Because time is nearly up. The next council meeting is in 2 days. If you don't sign an agreement to proceed with modifications or indicate that you're pulling out, they'll kill the project. I tried to schedule a proper meeting, but your office said you were indisposed. And Ms. Travers, well, she told me it was Jonathan's decision alone. I took a gamble coming here, hoping to catch you before it was too late." Sophia cast a quick look at Jonathan, noting how the conversation weighed on him. His knuckles whitened on the cane. She cleared her throat, stepping in diplomatically. "Mr. Riley, you must see Mr. Hayes is recovering from significant medical issues. He can't be ambushed like this." "I understand," Riley said, though tension underlined his words. "Believe me, doctor, I'd prefer a formal office appointment, but these bureaucratic wheels are turning fast. If you want the Westbridge project to stay alive, we need an immediate pledge of compliance with heritage regulations or a plan to reduce the scope. Something in writing." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "How complicated are we talking?" Riley rifled through his stack of papers. "We'd need a reduced demolition area, plus partial renovation of historically rated structures. That means capping the total number of new units. Your original plan was for a large-scale redevelopment, but community protests soared. The city is leaning towards a compromise. Keep half the historical buildings intact and integrate them into the new design. It's not impossible, but it's less profitable. Sophia saw the flicker of an internal debate in Jonathan's gaze. On one hand, the old Jonathan Hayes might have fought tooth and nail for the biggest possible development. On the other hand, the philanthropic side of him, especially after witnessing how quickly public backlash could strike, might see value in preserving heritage. Still, making such a decision in a matter of minutes in the middle of a social gala seemed reckless. "I need time," Jonathan said finally. "I'm in no shape to parse the financial or architectural details right now." He paused. "But I also realize ignoring it kills the entire project. One moment, let me think." He took a few steps away, leaning on the cane, staring at the polished floor as though it might reveal answers. Sophia drew closer, worry brimming. His breathing grew shallow, a sign of stress. "Jonathan," she said softly, "maybe you can give a conditional statement, something that says you'll comply with heritage requirements, but you reserve final approval once you've reviewed the details. That might hold them off, right?" He looked at her, eyes weary but appreciative. "Yes, that might be a middle ground." Turning back to Riley, Jonathan cleared his throat. "All right, I'll sign a letter of intent stating the Hayes Company will adapt the West Bridge plan to meet heritage guidelines. We'll preserve the necessary buildings. However, final architectural plans must be reviewed by me once I can fully assess them. That's my compromise." Riley exhaled visibly in relief. That should be enough for the council to postpone revocation, but they'll want that letter by tomorrow morning. Sophia felt a surge of protective concern. Jonathan had already faced intense scrutiny about new philanthropic expenditures. Now he was about to commit to a large, complicated shift in a major property deal. Wouldn't the board see this as another impulsive move, especially if it reduced potential profits? She worried that the same members who confronted him at the gala might push for more control. But Jonathan stood firm, determined. "I'll do it. Let me speak to my attorney, Clark. Wait in the study down the hall, Riley. We'll get something typed up promptly." Riley nodded, relief mingling with lingering tension. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. And again, apologies for intruding on your event." The guard escorted Riley away, presumably leading him to a quieter room. Jonathan gave a soft groan, pressing a hand to his forehead. Sophia gripped his arm lightly. "You need a moment to rest, or—" "Yes, but first I must find Clark. We can't let this wait." His voice was resolute, those strain-etched lines around his eyes. "Come on." She didn't argue, guiding him with gentle pressure on his elbow. Together they retraced their steps, heading back toward the more public areas, searching for Clark among the swirling guests. They found him in a corner, deep in conversation with Peterson, the board member who had openly challenged Jonathan earlier in the night. Clark noticed Jonathan's arrival and broke away from Peterson, expression shifting to concern. "Mr. Hayes, everything all right? You look pale." Jonathan let out a terse breath. "We have an urgent city official waiting in the study. I need you to draft a quick letter stating our intent to meet heritage demands on the West Bridge project. If we don't produce it now, we lose the permit." Peterson, overhearing, stepped closer. "West Bridge? The city's threatening to revoke it? That was our biggest prospective development." He narrowed his eyes. "Who's this city official? Why wasn't Camille informed?" Sophia bristled at the tone, but Jonathan answered calmly, "I only just learned of it, Peterson. This man Riley came tonight. The short version is, we have to comply with heritage guidelines or watch them kill the plan. There's no time to wrangle the entire board." Peterson's jaw tightened. "And you plan to sign off on these demands without consulting us? That could slash projected profits by half. Our shareholders—" Jonathan's temper sparked. "I will not see the entire project lost because we hesitated. I'd rather negotiate reduced profits than zero." If you want to hamper me with red tape, do it at the next board meeting, but I'm making this decision now." Peterson glanced between Jonathan and Sophia, perhaps seeing the steely glint in Jonathan's eyes. Finally, he huffed. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you about the blowback." Clark, ever the diplomat, stepped in. "Let's keep our cool. Mr. Hayes has the final word tonight. Peterson, you can voice your concerns at the formal session. For now, I'll get the drafting started." He gestured for Jonathan. "Let's go, sir. My laptop is in the library." Sophia spoke up. "I'll come too, in case Jonathan needs a moment to breathe or rest." Peterson made a small scoffing sound under his breath, but Clark nodded. Jonathan simply gave a grateful nod to Sophia, and the three of them moved away from the main gathering. They entered the library, a stately room lined with leather-bound volumes and lit by a single crystal chandelier. Clark sat at a mahogany desk, pulling his laptop from a briefcase, while Jonathan sank into a nearby armchair, placing his cane aside. Sophia hovered close, noticing the slight tremor in Jonathan's hands as he tried to steady himself. This night was wearing him down, and they still had tasks to finish. Within minutes, Clark typed up the necessary language: the Hayes Company's formal pledge to comply with designated heritage preservation, thereby forestalling immediate revocation of the Westbridge permit. He read it aloud, glancing at Jonathan for approval. "That covers the main points," Jonathan said, voice tight. "Print it so I can sign." Clark obeyed, hooking the laptop to a small printer on the library's side table. As the machine whirred, Sophia spotted movement in her peripheral vision, someone peering in from the library's open double doors. Her pulse jumped, expecting Camille, but instead it was the silhouette of another board member, eyes gleaming with curiosity. She realized word might be spreading that Jonathan was taking major action right here and now. Sure enough, footsteps approached. Camille stepped into the library, face a picture of carefully composed concern. "Jonathan, you vanished. One of the guests said they saw you with a city official?" Jonathan's features tightened. "Yes, it's about Westbridge. I need to sign a letter to keep the project alive. We can discuss the ramifications tomorrow." Camille's gaze flicked to Clark, then to Sophia, landing finally on the document as it emerged from the printer. "In the middle of a gala? You're taking on new stress after you've already spent hours socializing. Is this wise?" Her tone hovered between genuine worry and subtle accusation, aimed possibly at Sophia. Sophia interjected calmly. The city official insisted it was now or never. Jonathan can't ignore it if he wants to preserve the project's future. Camille pressed her lips together, perhaps frustrated at being left out of the loop. Still, she stepped aside as Clark handed the printed letter to Jonathan. Jonathan took a pen from Clark's outstretched hand. A hush fell, tension coiling in the air. With a decisive stroke, Jonathan signed his name. "Done," he murmured. A swirl of conflicting emotions crossed Camille's face. She forced a bright, hostess-like smile. "Then I suppose we'll adapt our strategy accordingly. Let's get you back to the gathering, darling. No point letting this overshadow what remains of your welcome reception." Jonathan managed a weary nod, but looked to Sophia. She recognized the silent plea. He was nearly at his limit. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "maybe you can greet a few more guests briefly, then rest. We don't want you collapsing." He exhaled in reluctant agreement. The real estate letter in Clark's hand felt like another weight added to the precarious pile on Jonathan's shoulders. Another big decision made quickly, another potential challenge for the board meeting. Yet the crisis had been averted, at least for the moment. As the group stepped out of the library, the background music and chatter washed over them again. Jonathan grasped his cane, his step unsteady. Sophia hovered protectively, scanning for the nearest seat he could collapse into if needed. Camille guided him with a light hand at his elbow, throwing a glance at Sophia that said, wordlessly, "I'm watching you." Together, they headed back into the swirling crowd. The event was still in full swing, the night not yet done. But in Sophia's mind, one truth blazed. Every choice Jonathan made, even well-intentioned ones, seemed to tighten the noose of scrutiny around him. And with the board's big meeting looming, she could almost feel the storm clouds gathering, ready to break over them all when morning came. Night had draped its final hours over Lakeside Mansion by the time the last of the champagne glasses were collected and the string quartet packed up their instruments. What remained of Jonathan's welcome back gala was a scattering of guests in quiet conversation, a few stragglers exchanging business cards, and the faint odor of extinguished candles mingling with the floral arrangements. The air felt heavy with the aftertaste of negotiations and half-revealed tensions. Dr. Sophia Walker lingered near the main foyer, watching from a discreet distance as Jonathan, still in his tailored suit and leaning on his cane, thanked a pair of departing city officials with a polite nod. He looked utterly spent. In the distance, Camille Travers engaged in a final round of goodbyes with a group of socialites, her elegant midnight blue gown catching the warm glow of the overhead lighting. Sophia's gaze traveled to Jonathan again. The lines of fatigue etched around his eyes were deeper now than at any point that evening. She recalled the moments of strain, the hint of trembling in his hand as he signed the new real estate agreement. While he'd survived the night without a visible collapse, the cost to his body and mind was evident. A tall figure approached from behind. Clark, the attorney. He too looked worn but offered a faint smile of acknowledgement. "Quite a night, eh, Doctor?" he murmured. "Yes," Sophia replied softly. "He's done all he can to reassure everyone that he's back. I just hope he doesn't pay too steep a price tomorrow." Clark nodded. "The board is already whispering about the Westbridge Compromise. Some see it as a wise move, others think it's an unnecessary surrender of profit. Either way, the meeting next week will be lively." Sophia pressed her lips together. "And Ms. Travers?" The attorney glanced across the foyer where Camille had just finished saying goodbye to another cluster of guests. Her face was controlled, eyes scanning the room as if searching for potential threats or problems. "She's playing her part," Clark said diplomatically, "acting supportive in public. But I suspect she has her own strategies for the board meeting. She's extremely protective of Jonathan, and, by extension, of controlling how his wealth is used." Sophia swallowed. The memory of Camille's midnight summons and the forced letter of competency made her heart pinch with lingering resentment. Yet as she watched Camille cross the marble floor toward Jonathan, she had to admit the woman also knew how to put on a polished facade, exuding confidence that could sway uncertain supporters. Finally, the last guest departed. A hush settled over the mansion, broken only by the staff's subdued murmurs as they began cleaning up. In the parlor, Jonathan sagged into an armchair, letting his cane fall against the side table with a thump. Sophia hurried forward, kneeling by him. "Let's get you to your suite," she urged, concern threading her voice. He attempted a tired smile. "I'll manage," he murmured, though his shoulders slumped in a way that revealed how drained he truly was. Camille hovered a few steps away, then moved closer, placing a careful hand on his arm. "Well done tonight," she said softly, though a tautness hovered beneath her praise. "You convinced many skeptics you're not out of the game." "Maybe," Jonathan muttered. He lifted a hand to his forehead as though to ward off a headache. "But I'm not sure how many more evenings like this I can sustain before the board meeting." Camille glanced sideways at Sophia, then turned her attention back to Jonathan. "All the more reason you should rest thoroughly. Tomorrow we'll keep your schedule light. I'll handle any pressing calls." Sophia swallowed her own retort that Jonathan needed real recuperation, not just a light schedule. But she sensed any direct conflict with Camille might add stress right now. Instead, she placed a hand gently on Jonathan's shoulder. "Let's stand slowly," she said, tone professional and calm. Between Camille and Sophia, Jonathan rose. He clutched the cane, face grimacing at a jolt of pain in his leg. The three of them headed for the corridor leading to his suite. Along the way, staff members bowed respectfully, offering thanks or good nights. The hush of the hallway, once alive with footsteps and laughter, felt almost eerie now. At the suite's entrance, Camille paused. "Jonathan, I'll check on the final tasks from the staff, then see you in the morning." There was a faint tremor of unspoken emotion in her voice, perhaps a swirl of relief and worry. She darted a glance at Sophia, adding, "Dr. Walker, please ensure he's stable. If there's any emergency in the night, notify me immediately." Sophia nodded, watching as Camille departed in a whisper of satin fabric. Then she turned to Jonathan, who exhaled a slow breath, his expression tinged with gratitude. "Thank you for sticking by me all night," he murmured. "I couldn't have done it without knowing you were there if anything went wrong." A moment of quiet intimacy settled between them. In the lamplight of the suite's entry, Sophia glimpsed the humanity behind the billionaire persona. A man who'd been through a literal and figurative battle, still soldiering on despite the burdens on his shoulders. She gently placed her palm against his wrist to guide him inside. "Come on, let's get you comfortable." Inside, soft lamp glow cast warm shadows on the furniture. Sophia helped Jonathan ease onto the bed, then removed his suit jacket so he could breathe more easily. He sank against the pillows, face drawn with exhaustion. She retrieved a blood pressure cuff from the bedside stand, now a familiar routine, slipping it around his arm. While the cuff inflated, she kept her voice low. "How's the pain level? Any chest tightness? Dizziness?" He half closed his eyes. "Just sore muscles and a throbbing headache. No major dizziness." The cuff deflated. She checked the reading. His blood pressure was elevated, but not alarmingly so, likely a consequence of the night's stress. "I can give you a mild pain reliever and something to help you sleep," she suggested. "You need real rest." He nodded, reluctant but willing. As she prepared the medication, he spoke in a weary undertone. "You think I did enough to ward off the board's doubts?" "You did more than enough," Sophia said gently. "But they'll always find new angles if they want to challenge you. Just try not to dwell on it tonight." A tight smile curved his lips. "Easier said than done." He exhaled. "And Westbridge, that was an impulsive call, but I couldn't let them kill it. Not after all the preliminary investments. Now Peterson and his cohort might ramp up the pressure." He let out a humorless laugh. "Ah, the joys of corporate politics." Sophia offered him a glass of water and 2 small pills. "Take these. It'll ease the headache and help you sleep. Tomorrow we'll focus on your therapy again, hopefully minus the gala theatrics." He swallowed the medication, then slumped back against the pillows, eyelids fluttering with fatigue. "You know, I never realized how lonely this world could be until I woke up from that coma. All these people claiming to support me, but half of them are only here for their slice of the empire." The unguarded note in his voice tugged at Sophia's heart. She rested a hand briefly on his. "You're not alone, Jonathan," she said softly. "I'm here, Sister Agnes, and the orphanage kids are rooting for you, and even some of your staff genuinely care. You can find real allies if you look carefully." His fingers squeezed hers faintly before letting go. "Thank you," he whispered. "You've done more than I could have asked for." She watched as his eyelashes drooped heavily, the medication likely taking effect. Within moments, his breathing steadied, drifting into an exhausted slumber. Gently, she adjusted the blankets, turned off all but one soft lamp, and stepped out of the suite, quietly closing the door behind her. In the hallway, she found one of the private nurses waiting in case Jonathan stirred in the night. Sophia gave the nurse a quick summary of his condition, then made her way through the dim corridors to her own room. Yet rest eluded her. She changed into more comfortable attire, then stood by the window, staring out at the moonlit lake. The events of the evening replayed in her mind. Jonathan's poised speech, Peterson's confrontational remarks, the city official's sudden appearance, the swirl of discreet tension around each decision Jonathan made. And overshadowing it all, The board meeting that loomed, where those who doubted him might attempt to curtail his power or place it under Camille's guardianship. A knock on her door startled her. She crossed the room and opened it a crack, surprised to see Clark standing there, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He inclined his head in apology. "I'm sorry, Doctor. I know it's late. May I speak with you for a moment?" Curiosity edged out her fatigue. "Of course," she said, letting him inside. She offered him a seat on the small armchair near the dresser, and she perched on the bed, a respectful distance away. Clark ran a hand through his hair, removing his glasses to rub tired eyes. "I just finished storing the signed real estate letter. I was about to leave when I realized something. I never had the chance to ask you about Jonathan's full medical prognosis. I know you can't disclose every detail, but if the board tries to claim he's unfit at the upcoming meeting, I'd like to be prepared with a statement from his primary doctor." Sophia nodded, processing. "Yes, well, from a medical standpoint, he is recovering steadily. He's not fully restored. He needs ongoing therapy, rest, and minimal stress. But mentally, he's lucid and capable of making rational decisions. The hospital declared him fit to manage his affairs, or he wouldn't have been discharged." Clark allowed a small smile. "That's exactly what we need to emphasize. Could you provide a concise written note? Something official stating that, despite fatigue and the need for continued therapy, Jonathan Hayes retains cognitive clarity and decision-making capacity." Her stomach twisted slightly. Another letter. She flashed on the memory of being coerced by Camille to write something similar about the orphanage donation. But Clark's request felt more legitimate. He was Jonathan's attorney, aiming to protect him from board vultures. "All right," she agreed. "I can draft something in the morning, referencing his discharge records and current therapy status. I'll keep it factual without revealing private medical details." Clark nodded, relief in his eyes. "Thank you. This could help undercut any argument that Ms. Travers or the board might use to claim he needs a legal guardian for business decisions." Sophia's brows knit. "They're actually considering that?" "In some corners, yes," Clark said gravely. "A few board members have been whispering about a guardianship or partial power of attorney if Jonathan is deemed physically or mentally compromised. Camille publicly denies she wants that, but who knows what private conversations she's having. Regardless, your professional input will carry weight if the board attempts any official move." Sophia's earlier unease returned with fresh intensity. She let out a quiet breath. "I understand. I'll write it first thing tomorrow." Clark rose, gathering his bag. "I appreciate it, and, for what it's worth, I'm glad Jonathan has someone genuinely concerned about his health, not just corporate bottom lines." She offered a faint smile. "Thank you, Clark. Good night." He slipped out, and she locked the door behind him, her mind now swirling with renewed worry. Another letter, another piece of evidence in a labyrinth of legal and financial intrigues. She only wanted Jonathan to heal and to keep some semblance of autonomy, so that he could fulfill the potential he had for good, as he'd proven with the orphanage donation. Her gaze drifted back to the window. The moonlight fell across the lake in a silvery path, mesmerizing in its stillness. Yet inside the mansion, shadows of ambition and doubt moved ceaselessly, weaving a precarious tapestry around Jonathan's fate. Could a single letter from her really shield him from the board's possible power plays? She thought of Sister Agnes's recent relief, how the orphanage now stood secure thanks to Jonathan's help. The memory soothed her momentarily. If he could triumph in that scenario, perhaps he could also outmaneuver the board. But if they used his frailty against him, if they claimed he was impulsive or incompetent, how far would Camille go to maintain her influence? Eventually she crawled into bed, though her thoughts still churned. The echoes of the evening's music, the hushed deals, and the looming board session pressed in on her. Once again, she drifted into an uneasy doze, haunted by mental images of courtrooms, signed letters, and Jonathan caught in a tug-of-war between the person he wanted to be and the empire that seemed to define him. Outside, the night deepened, a hush settling over the lake and mansion alike. But with morning would come new challenges, the unstoppable march toward that pivotal board meeting, and an uncertain future that might redefine everything Jonathan and Sophia had fought for since the day he'd first stirred from his coma. A soft, spring dawn stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in delicate shades of orange and lavender. Morning light crept into the lakeside mansion's corridors, illuminating walls that had seen so much maneuvering and tension in recent days. In her guest room, Dr. Sophia Walker stirred from a fitful sleep. For a moment, she couldn't recall where she was, only the faint recollection of signing letters, whispering words of encouragement to Jonathan Hayes, and confronting Camille Travers in moonlit corners. Then memory came flooding back. Today was the day of the pivotal board meeting, one that would determine whether Jonathan would retain full control of his empire or if the powers lurking behind the scenes might impose new constraints. She rose, heart beating faster at the thought. She had a letter to finalize, one that could impact the entire proceeding. Less than an hour later, she was at her writing desk, penning a concise statement affirming Jonathan's cognitive fitness and medical stability for decision-making. She cited the hospital's formal discharge summary, his excellent recovery thus far, and her own professional observations of his mental clarity. Beneath it, she signed her name as Dr. Sophia Walker, attending physician. It felt strangely surreal. This single sheet might be all that stood between Jonathan and a forced guardianship. As she proofread, a knock on the door broke her concentration. "Yes?" she called. A muffled voice came from the other side. "It's me, Clark." She opened the door, greeting the attorney with a faint smile. He too appeared burdened by anticipation, hair slightly disheveled as though he'd been running through the house. "Morning, doctor. The meeting's been moved up an hour. Some board members insisted on an earlier start. How's Jonathan?" Sophia stepped aside, letting Clark in. "I haven't checked him yet this morning, but last night's events left him exhausted. I hope he slept enough." She waved the letter in her hand. "This is the statement you requested. I only need a moment to print a clean version from the study, and I'll sign it." Clark glanced at it, relief evident. "Excellent. We'll share copies with the board so they can't claim they never saw it. Camille also asked me if she could see any new documentation regarding Jonathan's health. I told her I'd first confirm whether you're comfortable releasing details." Sophia's jaw tightened slightly. Dealing with Camille's demands was always a delicate matter. I can let her see the basic statement of competence. Beyond that, she doesn't need private medical details. "Agreed," Clark said. "No reason to reveal any more than necessary." They left the guest room together, walking briskly down the hallway. On the way, they passed by Jonathan's suite. The door was half open, and inside, Sophia glimpsed a nurse assisting Jonathan with a fresh shirt and tie. Even from the corridor, she could read the tension in his posture. He was about to face another grueling test. "Doctor," Jonathan called when he noticed them. "Could I speak with you and Clark a minute?" She and the attorney slipped into the room. The nurse, sensing the conversation was private, quietly stepped out after a polite bow. Jonathan was seated at the edge of the bed, cane propped nearby. He looked pale and a bit shaky, but his eyes were focused. "I see you're both prepared," he said, noticing the documents under Clark's arm and the typed letter in Sophia's hand. "Thank you." Sophia approached. "How are you feeling? Any pain or dizziness?" He exhaled, rotating his shoulders. "Just the usual soreness. Anxiety is the bigger problem. This meeting, if some board members propose partial guardianship or a new co-chair, it could overshadow every step I've taken since waking up." Clark nodded solemnly. "We have your back. The letter from Dr. Walker should shut down any talk of mental incapacity. But be ready for them to question recent decisions, especially your philanthropic donation and last night's real estate compromise." Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, tension etched across his brow. "I'll defend those decisions. I won't let them paint me as reckless." Sophia set a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. she said, repeating the reassurance from the night before. Focus on calm, measured responses. If you need a break, take it. Don't let them push you into overexertion. His mouth twitched in a faint smile. Right. Let me finish getting dressed, then we can head to the boardroom. They're setting it up in the mansion's west wing, correct? Yes, Clark confirmed. Camille insisted on hosting the meeting here so you wouldn't have to travel. The board agreed. Sophia withdrew to the suite's threshold, giving Jonathan privacy to complete dressing while Clark lingered for final preparations. She felt nerves flutter in her stomach, almost as if she were the one about to be scrutinized. She'd never witnessed a high-stakes corporate session like this, where personal health, empire-level finance, and a swirl of private politics collided. But she resolved to do her part. If Jonathan needed her testimony, or if the board questioned her, she'd stand firm. By mid-morning, the board members had gathered in a large oak-paneled conference room on the mansion's west side. Tall windows offered a view of the lake, though thick drapes partially covered them to reduce glare. A long table dominated the space, chairs neatly arranged, and pitchers of water stood at intervals. It was a stark contrast to last night's colorful gala, now replaced by an atmosphere of serious negotiation. Sophia stood near the rear of the room, arms loosely folded, listening as members arrived, greeting each other with subdued courtesy. Camille Travers entered with her usual poise, wearing a fitted gray business dress, hair pinned back. She flashed Sophia a contained smile, neither warm nor overtly hostile, just an acknowledgement. They both understood there would be no direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary. Peterson arrived, the board member who had most openly challenged Jonathan at the gala. He nodded curtly to Sophia, then took a seat near the head of the table. Others followed, men and women in suits, some old enough to have been with Hayes Enterprises for decades, some younger, exuding modern corporate confidence. The hush thickened once they noticed Jonathan's seat, a tall-backed chair at the center, next to an empty seat presumably for Camille. At last, Jonathan appeared in the doorway, cane in hand. Clark guided him, carrying a slim briefcase of documents. Sophia hung back, letting them take the lead. A ripple of attention passed through the board as Jonathan slowly but steadily approached the table. He didn't appear outwardly frail, just a man recovering from adversity. He offered a measured nod to the group, lowered himself into the chair, and set the cane aside. Camille then took the seat beside him, forming a strategic pair. "Good morning," Jonathan began, voice calm. "I appreciate everyone coming here. Let's proceed efficiently. We have many matters to address, including my recent decisions and the future management structure." Heads bobbed in agreement. The board's executive secretary, a poised woman with a neat stack of folders, began distributing agendas. Peterson cleared his throat. First item, confirmation of Mr. Hayes' leadership capacity. He shot a glance at Clark. "We understand you have new medical documentation?" Clark stood briefly. "Yes, I do." He held up a sheet of paper. Dr. Sophia Walker, Mr. Hayes' attending physician during and after his coma, has provided a concise statement attesting to his mental competence and ability to make informed decisions. He passed copies around. All eyes flicked to the document. Sophia could hear the faint rustle of pages. A knot of tension built in her chest. Would they accept it without challenge? One older board member, Ms. Whitcomb, peered over her spectacles. This seems straightforward. Dr. Walker states that while Mr. Hayes requires ongoing therapy for physical recovery, his cognitive function is unimpaired. That matches the hospital's discharge notes. I see no grounds to question his basic decision-making authority. Most board members nodded, but Peterson wore a pinched expression. Fine, so you claim he's mentally sound. That addresses part of the concern. But what about the questionable choices we've seen? The abrupt philanthropic donation, the last-minute shift in the Westbridge plan, both done with minimal board consultation. How do we reconcile that with prudent leadership? Jonathan straightened in his seat. Sophia admired how he fought through weariness to meet Peterson's gaze. I understand your concern. Let's take them one by one. The donation was personal from my private funds, not from the corporate philanthropic trust. It was a heartfelt decision, yes, but not reckless. I stand by it. Peterson arched a brow. Even if it unsettled certain investors who saw it as impulsive. Yes, Jonathan replied evenly. It was my personal money. No investor has the right to question that. As for Westbridge, our official plan was at risk of immediate cancellation if we didn't comply with heritage guidelines. I had to adapt to save the project. I won't apologize for preserving a major investment rather than letting it be scrapped over red tape. A light murmur of agreement rippled around the table, though a few held uncertain expressions. Camille cleared her throat, leaning in smoothly. Perhaps it would help if we formalize a procedure for urgent decisions while Mr. Hayes recovers. That way, no one can claim they were blindsided. We can keep daily updates, ensuring the board feels informed. Sophia caught the subtle strategy in Camille's tone, offering a structured approach that placated the board's fears while keeping Jonathan's autonomy mostly intact. A shrewd move. Peterson jumped on that. Yes, but how do we define urgent? Let's be honest. Mr. Hayes is not operating at full capacity. He's made big calls from his sickbed. If we had a co-chair arrangement or if Ms. Travers assumed a more formal role, Jonathan's fist tightened on the table, though he kept his voice level. I see no need for a co-chair. My mental capacity is verified. My decisions are in the best interest of the company. The board can advise, but I won't cede my authority just because I'm recovering physically. Another older member, Edison, cleared his throat. Let's not approach this with hostility. We're simply concerned about continuity. Suppose we implement an interim protocol. Jonathan maintains final say, but in critical financial moves above a certain threshold, he consults 2 designated board members for a quick consensus. If in 48 hours they can't agree, Jonathan's decision stands. A thoughtful hush followed. Several board members exchanged glances, considering the compromise. Sophia watched Jonathan carefully. He looked pensive, eyebrows drawn in thought. Next to him, Camille's face remained unreadable. Jonathan finally replied, I'm not thrilled about adding layers of bureaucracy, but if it eases the board's mind, ensuring I'm not making unilateral moves while I still recuperate, maybe it's workable. Under the condition that it's temporary. Once I'm medically cleared for full stamina, we revert to standard procedures. Let's say 3 months from now. Edison nodded. 3 months. That sounds fair. Camille laid a hand lightly on Jonathan's forearm, playing the supportive ally. This framework is wise. It'll reassure everyone that no major risk is taken while you continue healing. And we do want to see you fully healed, darling. Peterson, though still looking skeptical, grunted. All right, but I want it in writing that after these 3 months, if we still see signs of compromised energy or rash decisions, the board may revisit a co-chair proposal. A flicker of irritation crossed Jonathan's face, but Clark gently tapped his own pen on the table as if to say, let them have that caveat. It's better than guardianship. Jonathan inhaled slowly, then nodded. Fine. Put that clause in. If we're at an impasse in 3 months, we can reevaluate. I'm confident we won't need to. Peterson grudgingly agreed. Whitcomb typed notes on a tablet, finalizing the draft of this new interim protocol. A wave of relief washed over Sophia. No one was forcing Jonathan to relinquish power or naming Camille as co-chair. Instead, they'd arrived at a compromise that recognized his continued leadership, with a short-term measure to keep skeptics at bay. From her vantage point, it seemed far kinder than the draconian guardianship she'd feared. Over the next hour, the board tackled other pending issues: last year's expansions, certain philanthropic partnerships, the timeline for Westbridge modifications, and housekeeping updates about staff changes. Jonathan participated with calm assertiveness. When he grew fatigued, he discreetly signaled Sophia, who handed him a glass of water and quietly reminded him to breathe deeply. Finally, after covering the agenda, the executive secretary announced the meeting adjourned. Board members rose, collecting laptops and files, murmuring among themselves. A few approached Jonathan to shake his hand or pat his shoulder. The mood was significantly brighter than it had been at the start. Camille, too, stood, wearing a faint smile. "That went better than I expected," she remarked. "They're giving you a chance to prove yourself, and we avoided a forced second chair." Jonathan exhaled, a subtle tremor passing through him as the adrenaline receded. "Yes, a compromise. But we have to deliver. If I falter, or if they see me as impulsive again, they'll push harder for co-chair. I can't let that happen." Sophia offered him a supportive nod. "One step at a time. You got through the night's gala. You handled the city official, and now the board is cooperating for now. We'll keep up therapy, keep you steady." He allowed himself a soft, tired smile. "Thank you for everything." Peterson passed by on his way out, pausing to offer a curt nod. "Mr. Hayes, I'll be watching the Westbridge developments closely, but I respect the effort you're putting in. Good day." After Peterson left, Jonathan let out a relieved chuckle. "He's never cordial. That must be the closest I'll get to a compliment." Clark approached with the final typed resolution. "We should sign this. Everyone else is on board with the interim measure. Ms. Travers, would you like to review it first?" Camille skimmed the text. "All seems correct." She gave a satisfied nod. Jonathan signed, then the other two senior board members, Whitcomb and Edison, added their names as witnesses. The tension in the room dispersed like fog under sunshine. Sophia felt her shoulders relax, the faint ache of worry loosening. This concluded the board's immediate threat. Jonathan was still in command, though with a short leash, but it beat losing autonomy altogether. As the last board members exited, Jonathan leaned heavily on the table, exhaustion etched into his features. Camille touched his shoulder. "You should rest. I'll handle any follow-up calls. If you overdo it now, you'll set back your recovery." Sophia stepped forward, gently placing her hand on Jonathan's arm. "She's right. Let's get you seated. Then maybe a nap. You've endured a marathon." He looked between them, Camille, the ex-fiancée turned ally, and Sophia, the doctor who'd revived him. A fleeting smile crossed his lips. "I suppose both of you have my best interests at heart, in your own ways. Thank you." Camille gave a small, gracious nod, stepping aside as Sophia guided Jonathan out of the conference room. They moved slowly through the corridor, the hush of the mansion returning. Staff resumed daily duties, no longer scurrying for a high-stakes meeting. When they reached Jonathan's suite, he sank into the armchair with a weary sigh. His cane rested against the wall. Sophia crouched beside him, checking his pulse again. It was high, but not dangerously so. She realized how deeply she'd come to care about his well-being, far beyond mere professional duty. "You've gained some breathing room," she said gently. "Now you can concentrate on therapy, on steady improvements, so by the time that 3-month review hits, you'll be fully unstoppable." A faint grin tugged at his lips. "It's a good plan. I won't waste this opportunity." She nodded, heart lighter. "I'll do my part, making sure you stay healthy and strong, and no more chaotic surprises, I hope." Jonathan chuckled softly. Famous last words, but yes, let's aim for that. He closed his eyes, sinking deeper into the chair. Outside, morning's light had brightened into full day, the mansion's windows revealing a lake shimmering under gentle sunbeams. The estate felt renewed somehow, the atmosphere less burdened than the night before. Sophia rose, intending to let him rest. As she reached the door, he spoke again, voice quiet. "Sophia, about the orphanage. I know we secured the funds, but let's not stop there. I want to give it a real future, a stable partnership. Once I'm stronger, we'll talk about it, okay?" Her chest swelled with gratitude. "I'd like that," she whispered, "and Sister Agnes will be thrilled." He offered a small wave, eyes already drifting shut in much-needed rest. Sophia slipped out, easing the door closed. A sense of possibility stirred in her heart, even amid the memory of the long battles they'd just fought. Standing alone in the hallway, she let herself breathe, the morning's sun warming her through a nearby window. She thought back to the moment she'd first changed Jonathan's bandage in that silent hospital suite, confessing the orphanage's plight in desperation. Who could have imagined how their lives would intertwine? A wealthy man awakened from a coma, pledging help to a cause dear to her heart. A doctor forced to navigate corporate storms to protect him as he regained his empire. Perhaps the greatest lesson she'd gleaned was that healing went far beyond bandages and IVs. Healing also meant restoring hope, forging alliances, and having the courage to face challenges that threatened to overshadow every good deed. Jonathan had woken from a deep slumber not just physically but emotionally too, discovering a new reason to fight for both his company and the vulnerable children he chose to champion. And though Camille's presence still loomed, watchful and proud, Sophia no longer feared her quite the same. They had reached a guarded truce, Camille protecting the legacy and controlling narratives, Sophia protecting Jonathan's health and moral compass. It was an uneasy balance, but a balance nonetheless. As she strolled away from Jonathan's suite, a gentle hush accompanied her steps. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A message from Sister Agnes, no doubt another expression of gratitude for the orphanage's salvation. Another promise fulfilled. A new day had begun. And somewhere in the mansion, Jonathan Hayes, exhausted yet victorious, dozed in tranquil relief, knowing that for all the battles yet to come, he was no longer alone in his fight. Sophia Walker had proved that one determined doctor could change the course of fate, not just by changing a bandage in a lonely hospital room, but by stitching together hope, integrity, and compassion in a world too often ruled by power plays and hidden agendas. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.